How I uncovered my wife's cheating, her secret lover, and the unexpected path to my ultimate revenge. I encountered Lena, my wife of nearly 15 years, during high school. The subsequent Monday, after hosting a party at my parents' farm for my friends, I requested a family friend working for us to procure a couple of bottles of sour mashed potato. My cousin Terry, not accustomed to being drunk for long at his age, decided to head home instead of recovering. Although I successfully retrieved the keys from him, he believed he had outsmarted me. This idiot emerged from the front door, thinking he could walk the 5 miles to his house, and I allowed it. Reportedly, a young woman discovered him about a mile away, crawling through gutters while fetching the family mail, as he couldn't stand on his feet anymore. That's how I messed up. Before he left my parents' house, after involving her principled father, she transported my cousin to his parents' house. My aunt, my father's sister, had to deal with his multiple bouts of vomiting due to his foolishness. My parents learned about it, and I faced repercussions. In their view, I had betrayed their trust and was a horse's back. Regardless of my explanations, they believed the worst. Eventually, my aunt exaggerated the incident, portraying it as the worst thing humanity could do. I was in a tough spot. If only she knew the truth about her son's behavior. Nothing can be done when a person is blinded by faith and can't see reality. I accepted it and served my time. I realized early on that the truth doesn't matter most of the time. What matters is what people believe. From then on, I altered my attitude toward everyone I knew. My father used to say that I had aged prematurely because my walk changed. One day, an unfamiliar young woman approached me in the hallway before class after lunch. She expressed concern about wild parties at my parents' farm, alleging the presence of half-undressed girls and questioning my responsibility. I responded by asking her identity and the reason for her accusations. Lena LeBlanc introduced herself and mentioned finding a man from my parties in a ditch near her parents' house. I considered how far from the truth her perception was, but refrained from correcting her, mindful of the potential impact on my reputation in our small town of Jackson. I assured her that the situation wasn't as bad as she thought, avoiding any correction to her misconceptions. Instead, I invited her to join the next Saturday night party. Lena blushed, insisting she wasn't that kind of girl. I playfully remarked that maybe she wasn't, but she seemed interested. I continued to observe her body language, suggesting that her actions contradicted her words. She called me a horse's back, and I replied that it was true, but horses' asses were meant to be ridden hard. I quipped that she should let me know when she's up for it. She slapped me and stormed off, but I caught a glimpse of a smile before she slapped me. I chuckled, realizing my reputation for the year was already established. My cousin Terry, who witnessed the entire incident, mentioned that her words had made me one of the most popular in the educational institution that year. I responded that she had no idea about anything. Terry asked what I said to her, and I brushed it off, not bothering to explain. After smoking a joint each, I laughed because Terry was unaware that I had put the deck on the line. With that said, we headed to our first class, initiating a game between Lena and me. I played with Lena every opportunity I got, extracting everything I could from her. Whenever I saw her in public, I made it clear to anyone watching that I was undressing her with my eyes. This behavior became so noticeable that one of her friends would play the song Hungry Eyes on her cell phone when she spotted me, a way for me to get revenge for Lena LeBlanc punching me in the face. Yeah, I was being an idiot, but I enjoyed it. Additionally, she had an irresistible body, and I was just a fool honest enough to admit it. If one of her friends asked me what I was doing, I would honestly say, I'm interested in her. However, Lena declared we'd have a relationship when hell freezes over, and until then I should respect her wishes. This only fueled Lena's frustration, as her friends wanted to know what I had done to provoke such a reaction. When she explained it to them, they either laughed at the situation or teased her about her response. Lena LeBlanc was attractive in my eyes, a red-haired Cajun from the deep south with a body that haunted my dreams. Standing at about 5 feet 6 inches, she was tight, sweet, with curves in all the right places. If she got upset outside of the educational institution, she could unleash a stream of swear words in Cajun French at a mile a minute. Okay, I'll admit it. I enjoyed seeing her get upset. When her friends informed her about my actions, the smile on my face, seeing her blush over comments about our situation, revealed that I was enjoying it. I added to that when she wore a low-cut blouse displaying her cleavage, releasing a long, hungry wolf cry that echoed through the hallways. Everyone noticed Lena had put on something that made her look really good, and for the rest of the day, every guy clamored to check her out. I don't know if she enjoyed the attention, but I found it amusing. Numerous times I caught myself gazing at her enticing little horseshoe-shaped rear with a beautiful 36 rack, a narrow waist, and 34 hips. There wasn't a single coital act I didn't imagine doing with her. At times, I fantasized about taking her into the hayloft in my parents' barn, although I never hoped it would lead anywhere because her family was affluent. And mine was not. She possessed the spirit of a wild horse yet to be tamed, if that was possible. Depending on her mood, she could be passive, aggressive, or dominant. A man. Attempting to win her over would need the patience of Job, as it would take a long time to understand her before devising a plan to get into her clothes. The more I studied her, the more I realized how complex her personality was. That's how much her hot body and personality turned me on. If any woman could give me a blue balls attack, it was her. There were moments when she would catch my eye when no one else noticed, doing something to tease me. We both played this game intentionally to frustrate each other. It took almost the entire educational institution year before we both realized how effective it was. Everyone knew I was an ass lover, and nothing in my eyes was better than what Lena wore on her frame. Once, catching me ogling 3 of her friends, she leaned over and wiggled their asses while laughing. Apparently, her mother had told her that men attracted to asses turned out to be the most faithful husbands, a belief that spread through the entire educational institution after she shared it with Flat Karen. We were both set to graduate 12th grade with honors. She became valedictorian and I secured the 2nd spot. She believed that if my extracurricular activities were known, I wouldn't be considered at all. Rehearsing for our graduation ceremony roles on the auditorium stage a month away, I was to be there in case she fell ill. I knew she'd come regardless, even out of spite. There was no way she'd let me win by default. Both recipients of substantial educational grants, our last high educational institution dance was that upcoming Saturday. In the fall, I planned to attend Southeast Missouri University to pursue a master's degree in agricultural science. Leaving the stage through back stairs leading down the hallway, I ran my hand over her soft rear end, whispering, "When will you be ready to let me knock on it?" Turning around, she slapped me, saying, "When hell freezes over." Fool. When there was nothing to lose and no witnesses, I became a bit aggressive. Frustrated, I pulled her close, and lowering my head, looked into her eyes. Initially resistant, I persevered with unwavering determination, recognizing it as my sole opportunity to make a move. Her eyes widened as I brought my mouth close, initiating a forceful, deep French kiss with intensity, claiming her mouth as my own. Injecting the kiss with passion and desire, I decided that if I was paying the price, I deserved to extract every ounce of satisfaction. It was to be my first and perhaps only kiss with her, and I aimed to make it unforgettable. After savoring the taste I longed for, I released her to gauge her reaction, expecting a passionate or frustrated response. I was surprised when she forcefully pinned me against the wall, matching my aggression and turning the situation thrilling. Another deep, lingering kiss followed, revealing her assertive side. Our bodies melded together as she grabbed my lap, showcasing her assertiveness, and the recognition of size added intensity to the charged atmosphere. Lena expressed that she had been waiting for this for most of the educational institution year, mentioning that she was glad I finally decided to be a man. She wished I had told her that months ago and requested that I loosen my grip. I responded, stating that I wouldn't until she agreed to exclusivity. She firmly replied, "Deal. You've been the only one I've looked at since you slapped me." I smiled and brought my mouth to hers again, this time revealing my tender side, kissing her softly and deliberately. My hands firmly rested on the softness of her cheeks, feeling like I had held a piece of heaven. Our kisses were both demanding and open, with Lena exploring my figure. Leaving the landing a few minutes later, thinking we heard a noise, we held hands, realizing our relationship had taken a big step forward. Outside the educational institution, the heightened mutual attraction during the educational institution year intensified our feelings. Those who saw us leave immediately noticed the smiles on our faces, sparking discussions in the corridors for the rest of the day. It was amusing because neither of us had dated that year, seemingly waiting for each other. I waited for her at the educational institution entrance, and without saying a word, she handed me the educational institution book she was talking to at home. Lena suggested stopping at the Dairy Queen for a milkshake before I dropped her off at home. Karen was shocked, exclaiming if Lena and I were finally admitting our interest in each other. Lena assured her that she would call later that night to explain everything. We walked out of the house holding hands, heading for my Jeep Cherokee Sport. At the Dairy Queen, she wanted a Blizzard, and I wanted a regular shake, so I ordered both in the largest size. In the city park at one of the picnic tables, we started getting to know each other. Around 6 in the evening, I dropped her off at her parents' house. Her mother opened the door for her, and her father, shocked by my respectful approach, eventually gave his consent for me to take his daughter to the dance on Saturday night. He appreciated the respect, considering it a testament to my upbringing. Years later, when I asked for his daughter's hand in marriage, he didn't object as long as I followed his plans to protect his assets. After Lena went into her parents' house, I headed to my parents' farm. My parents sensed a change in my life, and when questioned, I mentioned an interesting conversation. Privately, my dad asked about the redhead I invited to the educational institution dance on Saturday night. From that day on, Lena and I were inseparable. It was Saturday, the day my parents went into town. I was in the hayloft, preparing to haul a few bales of straw after cleaning out 4 stalls with the loader on the front of the tractor. I did this once a month, usually on the first Saturday of the month. The horses were in the paddock in the pasture. I carried everything to the edge of the loft and was just getting ready to spread them out on the floor of the stalls when I heard Lena's voice calling me. "I'm here," I said. "I have 14 more bales to drop before I go down." I started throwing them over the side as fast as I could and was about ready to climb down when I saw Lena's head sticking out above the floor. I went over to greet her as she finished her climb. It was funny how much flat space was open in the straw bales. A moment later, we were lying with our arms around each other on bales of straw, our mouths closed, and our hands exploring each other's bodies. She, like me, was eager to get up from where we stood on the stairs. It wasn't long before she was pulling off my shirt, and I had just finished undoing the buttons of her blouse, anticipating how I would feel her beautiful chest when we were interrupted. Lena and I probably would have gotten carried away if we hadn't heard my parents honking. I noticed my parents trying to grab my attention as we descended the stairs. They were already approaching the barn. Lena and I swiftly spread out the straw in the stalls. In one of the stalls, Mom and Dad caught us throwing straw at each other, and laughter ensued. Curiosity led my parents to the barn, prompted by the sight of a strange car in the yard when I wasn't around. They were pleasantly surprised to find a pretty girl about my age visiting the farm. It was intriguing to observe the surprise on my parents' faces when I introduced Lena to them as my girlfriend. I informed them that as soon as I finished bedding the floor, I would saddle the horses and take her for a ride. Mom suggested having lunch first, and Lena volunteered to help. They headed toward the house, prompting my father to commend my quick thinking and advise me not to jeopardize this new relationship. "Lena is better company, just like your mother was at the same age," he said. "Make sure she's good enough to be the mother of your children if you're considering it." My father, a practical man, offered straightforward thoughts, emphasizing the consequences of our actions. I learned then that he always had a fondness for redheads. Dad assisted me in setting up the 4 horse stalls before returning to the house. By the time we got back, Mom and Lena had already become friends. After lunch, we went for a horseback ride, reaching the back 50. After tying the horses to a low branch, finding new spots on the grass by the swimming pond, we leaned against a tree. Around 5 in the afternoon, Lena left to get ready for the educational institution dance. While dancing that night, Terry overheard Lena telling Karen that my sweet and gentle personality attracted her. Despite our teasing, we never took it further. Lena explained to Karen and Terry that she appreciates my ability to control my temper, yet can be aggressive when needed. His passive nature guides him in everything, but when he sets his mind to something, no one can make him back down. "Waiting for me like I was the only one proved that," she added. Terry attested to my loyalty, saying, "He'd do anything for me, just as I would for him. Piss him off, and you'll realize you underestimated him." More than one boy here crossed him, and after he dealt with them, they were lying on the ground in blood. When I picked her up for the last dance of the educational institution year, her parents were surprised when I brought her a corsage without a special occasion. They said it was the most beautiful bouquet they had ever seen. I explained that I made it from plants in a small nursery my father and I had started on the farm. "I made it in neutral colors, so it goes with anything," I said. They seemed very impressed. She looked stunning in that white summer dress, emphasizing her curves. All night I thought about her. There was no doubt in everyone's mind that we were now a couple. Yeah, she was a real tease to me, and she knew it. I think she was irritating me that night, kind of paying me back for what we'd done to each other during the educational institution year. Toward the end of the summer, we spent a lot of time in the hayloft. Mom and I had a long conversation after she found my stash of contraceptives hidden in a far drawer. It was then that she decided to have a conversation with the woman she hoped would be her future daughter-in-law. I must have realized what was said because, shortly afterward, Lena informed me that she was taking birth control pills. One night at dinner, Mom put in her 2 cents, saying, "The horses seem to like the stalls better and they've gotten much sharper in the pasture. I wonder if it might be because the straw has taken on a new odor." I almost choked on my food and started coughing, and my dad looked up and said, "I missed something?" My father recognized my early interest in gardening and fostered its growth under his guidance. We transformed 20 acres of our 250-acre farm into a Christmas tree farm, acquiring small trees inexpensively through a reforestation grant after identifying the best tree type for the Christmas market. Every spring break, my father and I spent a week planting rows of new seedlings, creating a special bonding time for us. About 2 weeks before planting, we tilled the plot, repeating this process 3 or 4 times, depending on the weather, before leveling it. This facilitated quick and easy planting, allowing us to promote our first crop well before sale. The following season, with approximately 400 trees standing at 80 feet tall, the remaining task was pruning them to perfection for retail buyers. We even devised a labeling system for buyers to know the farm of origin. In 6th grade, my father, acknowledging my passion for growing plants, emphasized the need to replenish topsoil. An arrangement with the city of Jackson involved bringing collected yard waste to a designated site for mass topsoil production. Cape Girardeau adopted a similar practice, and from an early age, at least twice a month. I spent a day or two creating mulch by chopping up twigs, filtering out non-biodegradable items burned in oil drums. The ashes were scattered along the plot boundary for a cleaner end product. Once the pile reached a certain size, we added chemicals to stimulate the rotting process and maintain moisture. Turning the heap over once or twice a month ensured proper aeration. Local building contractors learned they could dump excess soil without a removal fee, mostly Missouri red clay. We mixed this soil with our biodegradable mulch, leading this side of our growing business to claim quite a few acres after topsoil removal. Some of the donated soil was used to level and grade the land for our greenhouses. It took 18 months to transform useless dirt into high-quality topsoil used for bedding in our greenhouses and sold to the retail market in 10-pound bags. In the first 3 years, enough profit was made to build 2 large glass greenhouses, heated in winter with gas furnaces, filled with growing flowers, and shipped to local wholesalers as needed. Implementing a system of PVC tubing and an expanding hose, we designed an automatic watering system hanging from the top down. Applying the same principles to water our crops, a drainage system built by my father on the concrete floor collected excess water for reuse. This efficient approach saved on costs and eliminated the need for a pond to collect excess fertilizer from watering. During the summer, we constructed an additional 4 greenhouses to cultivate white and red poinsettias for Christmas, eventually reaching a total of 10. Recognizing the money earned through our collaborative efforts, my father decided I could graduate without incurring debt. I vividly recall Lena's initial exposure to our operation, which aided her comprehension of why I selected this career path. My father conveyed that my inquisitive nature played a pivotal role in bringing this business to fruition. He noted that I was always asking questions, prompting family discussions. Following conversations with my wife and securing her approval, the family embarked on this venture, now a significant and steadily growing source of income. Inquiring about the farm's previous use, Lena asked. My father explained it formerly raised beef, influenced by market fluctuations. By my graduation, we boasted 22 greenhouses, each 240 feet long, 40 feet wide, and 9 feet high. Weekly, we delivered high-quality organic produce. Responding to increased demand, we expanded further, with 2 greenhouses dedicated to leaf lettuce, 2 to bok choy, and 2 to English cucumbers. Employing 20 individuals, our chemical-free organic produce commanded higher prices from wholesalers, ensuring our financial prosperity. As anticipated, I joined the family business full-time while Lena pursued a career as a family nurse practitioner associated with Southeast Missouri Hospital. I proposed to her within a week of her receiving her license, and 3 months later, we hastily married due to her pregnancy with our daughter. Our 2 sons arrived a year apart from our wedding day. Spoiled by my parents, Lena was cherished, with my mother becoming our children's nanny, giving her a renewed sense of purpose. To this day, our children reflect the morals and values she instilled in them. Celebrating our 14th anniversary, my cousin Terry and his wife Karen expressed concerns about our relationship, suggesting Lena appeared to dominate and control me. At a family barbecue, they confronted me, asserting that Lena treated me as a second-class citizen, displaying a motherly fatigue in the relationship. Despite my attempts to defend Lena, they insisted that I had stopped listening to her, causing resentment. According to Terry, Lena was leveraging my softer personality to assert dominance, and some friends suspected she harbored a romantic interest outside our marriage. Reflecting on these comments, I confronted Lena about her treatment, expressing fatigue from being treated like a doormat. This revelation shocked her, making her feel out of place for the first time in a while. Luna, my 13-year-old daughter, questioned my father, asking him what had gotten into him. I responded loudly for everyone to hear, stating that I had reached a point where I could no longer tolerate the feeling that her mother was treating me like a servant. I warned that if her mother didn't change her attitude, our house would be turbulent for months. This statement served as an awakening for everyone present. I realized that for most of our married life, I had turned a blind eye because it wasn't worth fighting over. I allowed my wife to walk over me like a doormat without resistance. That night, Lena and I had a significant argument, something that had been brewing for a long time. I ended up sleeping on the couch. Toward the end of our argument, Lena remarked that I just didn't know how extra I was. That's when I lost control. We were fighting outside, away from the kids' hearing. Driven by anger, I grabbed Lena, turned her over my knee, and spanked her, a method I had used with our children for misbehavior. She went into the bedroom in tears with a very red bottom, locking the door to prevent my entry. To say that Lena was tiptoeing around me the next morning is an understatement. Lena had just been confronted with a new reality. When my wife and kids left home the next morning, I returned from the large office near the greenhouses to investigate. As I lay on the couch, contemplating when the change in our marriage began, it struck me that it was 8 years ago, a couple of months after my mother's passing. After conducting a thorough search of her bedroom, I found a wrist bracelet with custom-made 18-karat gold charms. The issue was I hadn't bought them for her. The charms were so sensual that she could never wear them in public. I knew they must have been custom-made to order by her lover due to their significant expense. I quietly pocketed it to take with me, wanting it to be acknowledged. This discovery lent credence to Karen and Terry's suspicions. Returning to my office, I kept quiet when questioned about it. I mentioned that I had a lot on my mind, which was true. Around 3 in the afternoon, with an office staff member present, I asked her to call the group my wife was in to inquire if they were accepting new clients. Fiona inquired for personal reasons, asking why I wanted to know. I explained that I needed to check my wife's actual work schedule, as some rumors had come to my attention that I needed to prove were not true. Fiona commented as she walked out the door that finally someone had the courage to tell me what they had been hearing for months. Fiona, Karen's sister and a military widow, had joined our company while her husband was in the service. She was now raising her daughter alone. I often wondered why she couldn't find another man. Fiona was the complete opposite of her sister, and beautiful. In all the years of our marriage, my wife was the only woman who had caught my attention. However, after seeing what Fiona had to offer in terms of femininity, I realized I was still young enough to start over. The freedom of knowing I had another choice brought peace to my state of mind. Although I had known her for years, thanks to Terry and Karen, I hadn't paid much attention to her. For some reason, I experienced the excitement of the unknown again, an amazing feeling. When she returned, the information she provided was quite revealing. Her work schedule was not at all what I had envisioned. Instead of working Thursdays and Fridays until 10 p.m. every week, she only did it once a month, like all the other doctors in their office. Fiona and I chatted for quite a few minutes. She attempted to pose questions subtly, avoiding clarity in her inquiries. Whether she was aware of it or not, she instilled a few thoughts in my mind that fostered hope for my future. This afforded her a significant amount of unaccounted-for time. It was surprising to discover that she only worked half a day on Wednesdays. Now the question arose, what was she doing with all that free time? 8 years ago, when a tragic accident befell my mother, my father and I were startled to learn that she had bequeathed her shares in the family business to me, entrusting them to her 3 grandchildren. During my childhood, they had sold most of the farm at an inflated price to a corporation, retaining 10 acres around the house in their name and another 10 in mine. The corporation paid off the mortgage for 10 years with interest. They gifted me the land as a wedding present for Lena and me, and on that land, Lena and I constructed our house. My father took his wife's loss hard and withdrew from society for a few months afterward. During that period, I assumed the role of the company's president, and my father retired as our first CEO. Though he still came in 3 mornings a week to stay updated and serve as an advisor. I was aware of an impending significant business trip in a couple of weeks, during which I would have to visit 8 different company offices to renew multi-year contracts requiring my signature. These contracts included product line extensions, providing opportunities to increase revenue. As it involved 3 countries, I had to be away for at least 3 weeks. My father and I continued to lead our company, now employing over 100 people with more than 48 greenhouses operating at maximum capacity. Fortunately, in my first year of full-time employment, I conducted a survey to identify potential underground water veins and found one that would sustain us for years. By discontinuing the county water supply, we reduced our total expenses by $10,000 per month. Additionally, we uncovered a vast natural gas cavity. Since the land had been in the family for generations, we still owned the mineral rights. Through negotiations with major companies, we secured a mutually beneficial arrangement. Even after covering our heating costs, we received a substantial monthly royalty. My cousin Terry, serving as our CFO, visited my office to brief me on the latest cash flow statement, revealing that we were on track for the most significant year of growth in the company's history. During this private meeting, I disclosed my discovery to him. Examining the report, he was as astounded as I was. Terry inquired about my plans, asking what I intended to do. I replied that I wouldn't send someone else to sign the contracts. Instead, I planned to pretend I had no idea what was going on. I explained that this would give the private investigators I was going to hire plenty of time to find out who my wife's lover was. Terry questioned the relevance of finding out in a 50-50 state like ours, suggesting it wouldn't matter in divorce court. I remarked that Lena's father, Leonard LeBlanc, was and still is a conniving person. Before Lena and I were married, he made us sign a prenuptial agreement, and I guess Lena forgot about it. Terry asked why he did it, wondering if Leonard LeBlanc was worth millions thanks to fracking, to protect his daughter from me ever getting a piece of her inheritance. I responded, stating that if we divorced because of infidelity, the guilty party walks away with the clothes, and that's the end of it. Upon arriving home that evening, my demeanor had notably shifted. My wife appeared to show a respect for me that had been absent for years. It seemed evident to both of us that our relationship had undergone a significant change. Lena was undoubtedly attempting to discern what I might be aware of. An interesting note was that same morning my father had opted for a 2-week fishing trip with childhood friends, a plan they had encouraged for years. He'd be away until my return. Throughout his absence, Lena had been home more frequently, sparking suspicions that something undisclosed was occurring in her life. A few days later, my daughter informed me that her mother was frantically searching for something and questioning all 3 children about it. "Daddy, Mom accused us of going into your bedroom and going through her dresser drawers," Luna said, noting the emotional weight attached to what her mother sought. Upon my return home, I inquired about it, but Lena downplayed its significance. When I mentioned our daughter's concern, Lena suggested that Luna might have misunderstood, planning to clarify after dinner that night. During dinner, I regarded Lena similarly to how I had during our school days, prompting a significant change in her mood. I presumed Lena now believed I was aware of her affair. Post-dinner, as she put the boys to bed, my daughter questioned me about the situation. "Luna, I'm not sure," I said. "People have informed me of something, and if it's true, things are going to get a lot worse around here for a while because it's going to take your parents a while to sort it out. Just remember that this situation didn't arise because of your behavior, or your brother's behavior. It's been 3 weeks since I discovered the bracelet with all the charms on it. The 16 charms were valued at $8,000 each. The platinum used in the bracelet along with the gold put the chain at $20,000. Whoever gave her this piece of jewelry, it was made by one of the most famous jewelers in the jewelry business. Since all the charms were unique, they were bought to commemorate special moments or events in these two's relationship. If you figure that she received 2 charms a year, perhaps for her birthday and anniversary, that works out to about 8 years. Reluctant to accept it, the circumstantial evidence pointed toward a direction I refused to consider. That's why I adjusted my schedule to acquire what I needed. I booked a hotel room in St. Louis to receive a full report from private investigators before proceeding with my business there. My fears were confirmed. My wife's lover for almost 8 years was a man I had known all my life. The private investigators handed me a written copy and a flash drive with the recorded evidence. After the gentleman departed with full payment, I perused the comprehensive report, finding it so detailed that I wondered how I didn't become physically ill. Fortunately, on my way back from Canada, I purchased a couple of bottles of scotch at the duty-free store and consumed more than a couple of strong shots while reviewing the report. Summoning my courage, I contacted my former father-in-law, Leonard LeBlanc, and requested his personal email account. Leonard, a proud man with his values, faced the personal distress caused by this report. Yet I knew that if I didn't disclose the truth, he would assist Lena in undermining me during our divorce. I explained to Leonard that I wanted him to know what's in store for him because he wouldn't believe it if he heard it from me. I mentioned that the dossier was handed to me about 2 hours ago and cost me $6,000 to get. When I received the letter, I sent it to him via my laptop and awaited the imminent phone call. Leonard LeBlanc might have appeared to be the epitome of Homer Pyle upon initial acquaintance. Standing over 6 feet 5 inches tall, he exhibited the same clumsiness and awkwardness as everyone else in his childhood. He was the son of a fortunate alligator hunter who amassed wealth. Despite his unassuming demeanor and simple language, he conveyed the impression of a dull-witted person. Many were deceived, underestimating the genius he concealed from most. When intrigued, he delved into thorough research starting from the ground level. CEOs were often astonished to discover after sealing a challenging deal that he had only been with their company for 6 months. While leading the corporation, he possessed the knowledge to enhance their profitability and productivity by exploiting their vulnerabilities, potentially saving millions from their initial costs. As soon as my cell phone rang, I answered, anticipating it to be my father-in-law, Leonard exclaimed, expressing his surprise at the situation, admitting that if I had told him, he would have called. He characterized me as the biggest liar in the country and questioned how much worse things were going to get from there. I asserted that I planned to do the same thing to them as he did, stating there would be no mercy for either of them. Leonard replied, expressing understanding and absolving me of blame, stating that he'd burn anyone for what they've done. He requested that I promise not to do anything before we talk and assured me that our words wouldn't be recorded. Leonard LeBlanc, a religious man with his own views on life and morality, garnered respect for steadfastly maintaining his principles. I suggested to my dad that we go fishing with the boys the first Sunday after I get home, and that he could call my daughter to arrange it tonight if she'll be home. He liked the idea, seeing it as an opportunity to eliminate 2 birds with 1 stone. He wanted to know what made me suspicious. I explained that I found a bracelet with a bunch of charms on it, had it appraised, and discovered it was custom-made. Last Monday, while in Montreal, I arranged to have it shipped to my wife from Paris. It would be sent by courier, 1 piece at a time, to arrive at her workplace with a note. I planned to contact my father-in-law and his lover at the appropriate time so they could find out the cost of my silence. All 16 pieces must be in her possession before I return home. Leonard expressed concern, anticipating that my wife and her lover would turn into lunatics. I replied, explaining that it would give me time to find a buyer for my shares in the corporation. Selling my father's dream was the only thing that could hurt him as much as it hurt me, throwing them off balance psychologically for the near future. Leonard understood the plan, and I continued, stating that their fears would become more apparent as the date of my return approached. Leonard inquired about the remaining duration of my trip, and I replied that I had 2 more weeks to live out of a suitcase. From the day the first courier letter hit my wife's eyes, they would be the walking dead. I remarked that it would have been easier if they were actually dead, suggesting a less complicated resolution. After he hung up the phone, I relaxed, knowing Leonard LeBlanc wouldn't wait for anyone. Hailing from the swamps, he knew how to resolve a matter without unnecessary questions. In the heart of New York City, staying at the Trump Hotel, I received the detective's unwelcome news. While still at my desk, well after 9 p.m., my father was dead, and I was shocked. I had to inquire about the details of what had happened. Evidently, my wife and he chose to take a swim in the rear southeast of the pond where Lena and I had spent considerable time on the initial Wednesday afternoon we started dating. When the kids were at school, they opted for a horseback ride to cool off. Dad got there before Lena due to the hot weather. Local authorities suspected that someone had introduced a pet alligator a couple of years ago, which had adapted to its new habitat. Divers found my father's body after they eliminated the alligator. All 3 of us grasped the circumstances. Lena, my wife, was physically undamaged but grappling with significant emotional distress. Our children stayed with their grandparents until my wife regained control of the situation. Returning to my table, I shared the recent revelation with those still present, then excused myself to attend to personal matters. While walking back to my room, I pondered the consequences of being on Leonard LeBlanc's bad side. I wondered about his plans for his daughter. After a stiff drink, I placed a call, and Leonard promptly answered. I began by asking about the kids. Dad said in slang that it was fair enough for the midlines, indicating that the kids were upset but within what he considered normal for their age. I asked if I could speak with them if they were up, and he handed me the cell phone. I spent the next hour talking to all 3 kids before returning the phone to Grandpa. According to what Lena managed to explain, Leonard mentioned that my father drowned as an alligator dragged him away. They found his undressed body with several dead animals in the refrigerator. While his body wasn't bitten, it had a few scratches, so he recommended a closed casket. I thanked Dad solemnly and informed him that I would be home Saturday morning to handle the funeral arrangements. I mentioned that I needed to call my wife and check on her. He remarked that it sounded good, stating that at times like this one has to keep up appearances before saying goodbye. I called Lena, and reports indicated she was in serious condition. Conversing with her was challenging, as she couldn't stop crying. She couldn't fathom how they hadn't spotted an alligator before, given their weekly horseback rides. I questioned if it was typical for them to swim undressed, and Lena couldn't bear it, dropping the call. Now she knew I was aware of the truth. The following morning, during a business meeting, the same 2 detectives from the previous night called me in after my wife fainted. While grieving and trying to drown her sorrows, a gas explosion occurred, blowing out part of the house. She didn't escape in time and was fatally crushed by debris. I requested to expedite the process due to my need to fly out urgently. Fortunately, they understood, and I secured a better deal than anticipated. I managed to catch the last plane to the Cape that evening. Stepping off the 12-seater plane, I found my father-in-law waiting. Dad said that my wife and he were counting on me and the grandchildren to stay with them until things were settled. This would give me time to get things organized and settled. I inquired about how Mom was handling it, and Dad revealed that she struggled until the police informed them this afternoon that she was your father's longtime mistress. Their suspicions were confirmed when they discovered blackmail notes Lena had been receiving in your father's office. I remarked that it must have bothered them. Dad added that it was a bracelet with 16 different erotic charms, all undressed, suggesting it could be seen as a model of what lovers did in those days. Of course, they planned to talk to me after the funeral. I asked how I should arrange to meet them, and Dad suggested a simple plan. I should take the prenup and the private investigator's report with me and give them to them right away. It would prove that I had no motive to frame them. I smiled, knowing he said it to remind me that all passings, until proven one way or another, would be treated as suspicious. The more candid I was about them, the less chance they would consider it a homicide. Dad and I went to the funeral home office together to select a casket. We settled on a closed casket for both of them. I then contacted Terry at the office, informing him that the contracts were signed and I would be taking a few days off. There was a considerable turnout at the funeral and tea party for the lovebirds. Considering everything, I believe my kids handled it well. I maintained my composure as much as possible, though there were moments when I couldn't hide my emotions. Many speculated about a closer-than-usual relationship between the two, but nothing was publicly mentioned about it. The detectives patiently waited while the fire inspectors finalized a report on the gas explosion at my house. They determined the cause to be a faulty installation conducted while I was away. Upon receiving the report, I could legally sue the gas company for negligent death and loss of home. They found no evidence to determine when the alligator was placed in the pond. Presenting the prenuptial agreement and the private investigator's report, I gave them a copy using my father-in-law's printer. They appreciated my disclosure, resolving any potential issues that might arise upon others reviewing their final report. While sitting on the back patio with Lena's father and enjoying cold beer, he mentioned that he and his wife planned to change their will, leaving everything to the kids in a living trust controlled by me until they reached the age of 30. I responded that it doesn't matter if he had anything to do with what happened, stating that karma has given them what they deserve, and we should leave it at that. Leonard smiled and complimented me, saying that he always knew I was a smart man who knew what to say when it was needed. At Macy's, where the kids and I were making significant purchases, Fiona ran into me. We had moved into my dad's house during the remodel of mine, which was stale and desperately needed repair. I explained to Fiona that we were buying things because we had nothing left, and introduced her to my 3 children, Luna, Leon, and Levi. We decided to start with the boys, figuring out their preferences and dislikes, gathering enough underwear, t-shirts, blue jeans, shirts, jackets, and other clothes to last 2 weeks. After paying for our selections, I made 6 trips to the car, utterly exhausted by the end, including the last trip involving new shoes. The children suggested that Fiona should come with us to our temporary home, and then she could return with me to help pick out a new closet. Fiona hesitated, expressing that she didn't want me to think she's meddling in things that don't concern her. Luna firmly stated that she thought I should go with Fiona, and then take her out to dinner to show how much we appreciate her help. That's precisely what we did. After dropping the kids off and unloading everything, Fiona and I returned, working for a total of 4 hours. I invited her for dinner, and she mentioned that she had called Luna to get her agreement and made arrangements on her cell phone to have their favorite pizza delivered. When I got home, the big question surfaced: Daddy, are you going to ask her out on a real date? And that remains a question yet to be answered.
At around 5:30 p.m. on Sunday, Beverly entered through the front door, tossed her purse and keys onto the nightstand, and made her way down the hallway to the master bedroom. I'm unsure if she noticed me sitting in the office, but it didn't really matter. Over the past few years, I've practically become invisible to her. Approaching her, I retrieved her set of keys, took my spare keys from her, and then rummaged through her purse. I removed her cell phone and wallet, extracting all the cash and credit cards from my wallet and stashing the loot in my pocket, just to be safe. I also grabbed her driver's license before returning to my spot in the office. 15 minutes later, Bev emerged from the hall, looking well-dressed, and spotted me. As she slung her purse over her shoulder and grabbed her keys, she remarked, "I'm meeting some girls from work. Don't wait up." "No, you're not going out with girls from work," I protested. "Jack, you should know by now. You don't control me. I'll do as I please," she retorted. "I didn't say you couldn't hang out with girls from work. I said you're not going to. You're going to see your boyfriend, so don't lie to me," I stated. Beverly stood silently for a moment before boldly entering the office and confronting me. "All right, Jack, you know I'd prefer to handle this differently, but let's end it here. You have two options. Either salvage what's left of this marriage by granting me some freedom, or face divorce and be cut out of my life." "What's it going to be?" she challenged. "I'll take door number 3, I replied with a smirk. "Don't be childish. There's no door number 3. Either accept that I have a lover now, a real man, or brace yourself for the consequences," Beverly warned. I stood up, walked over to Bev, and pushed her against the wall, removing the engagement ring and wedding rings from her left hand. With my face close to hers and a fierce glare in my eyes, I whispered angrily, "Here's your door number 3. It's my front door. When you leave through it, it'll be the last time you walk out with anything and never return. You won't get another penny of my money. You'll lose your husband, your daughter, your house, your money, your car, and your job eventually." "You're living in a fantasy, Jack," she muttered nervously. "My lawyer will destroy you tomorrow. I'll send the divorce papers to your workplace. If you damage me, you'll suffer more than I will." I pulled her away from the wall and dragged her toward the front door, her heels causing her to stumble as she screamed incoherently. Bev struggled to maintain her balance, her composure shattered. Throughout our marriage, I had never laid a hand on her, and she didn't know how to react. As she began to regain her senses in the front yard, I shut the door and locked it, the lock already replaced earlier in the day. Earlier, as Bev left, I made the first of 2 calls. I dialed my 19-year-old daughter's number at college. "Hey, it's Dad. Our situation with your mom has hit a crucial point. Looks like she'll be moving in with her boyfriend, and I need to talk to you about it. Just so you know, I've got our last conversation and tons of past arguments recorded. You can listen to them, so you know the truth when she tries to twist things and blame me, which she probably will. Truth is, your mom's been cheating. Not sure how many times, but she's chosen to leave us for this guy. I'll explain more soon, but her boyfriend seems pretty sketchy, so be cautious in your relationship with her." I approached Patty, asking her to return home for the weekend. My intention was to have a conversation and offer her the chance to listen to some tapes if she desired. Thankfully, Patty agreed to come home on Friday. After sorting that out, I reached out to Martha, our neighbor down the block. "Martha, it's Jack," I said over the phone. "If the offer's still good, I'd like to take you up on it. Could you come over in about an hour?" I kept my explanation brief. I felt it was necessary to confide in Martha. Bev and I had met young, married, and soon had Patty. Things seemed good at the start, but Bev's demeanor changed rapidly. She became grumpy, manipulative, and controlling. I tried my best to keep the peace and make her happy, but it only seemed to make things worse. Looking back, I realized I contributed to my own suffering by constantly trying to please her. Now in our 40s, our lives were a mess. It wasn't long before I discovered Bev's affair with a man named Sylvester, known as Sly, who had a violent past. The realization that our marriage was beyond repair brought me a sense of relief, and I began planning my next steps. "I've heard stories where the husband takes half the money," I continued, "but not me. I took every penny I could find, including all the cash in the house. I changed the locks and planned to provoke Bev as much as possible. I knew her well enough to anticipate her reactions. She's dangerous in many ways, but this time she'd be a danger to herself, too. In fact, my planning had started long before I discovered Bev's affair. For years I had been discreetly recording our arguments. Bev thought the device I always carried with me was a simple MP3 player, but in reality, I was building a library of her outbursts to document her behavior. I knew no one would believe my stories unless I had proof, as she only mistreated me behind closed doors. I wanted to be able to share my experiences with everyone, including Patty, to reveal Bev's true nature. On the Monday following our Sunday argument, I hosted a gathering in the company break room. A prominent banner declared "Happy Divorce" overhead. With cake and ice cream at the ready, I eagerly anticipated the arrival of the process server. Fortunately, it was a pleasantly plump girl handling the task. Numerous photos were snapped as my co-workers and I celebrated the receipt of our divorce papers. I even took a picture while accepting the papers, planting a kiss on the server girl's cheek as she sported a festive hat. In another snapshot, I playfully fed her cake, both of us grinning. After the festivities, I emailed the photos to Bev, along with others from the party. Among them were shots of myself and Martha, my roommate, lounging in bed with sheets drawn up, smiling broadly. I hoped Bev would notice her wedding rings adorning Martha's left hand resting on my chest. An hour later, I received an angry call. "You scoundrel! My lawyer will tear you apart after seeing these photos. What a foolish move." "Hardly, Bev. There's nothing inappropriate in these images. No nudity, just pranks between neighbors. Just light-hearted pictures," I countered. "We'll address this later, Jack. I'll swing by the house this evening to retrieve some belongings. It might be best if you're not there. If I'm absent, you won't gain entry. All locks have been changed. If you need anything, be there well before 6:45. Martha and I have plans at 7 o'clock, and I'd rather not be late." Last night marked the most satisfying closeness I've experienced, and tonight promises to be even better. With that, I ended the call and ignored her subsequent 5 attempts. While I haven't answered all her calls since, I have listened to every message. Unlike other men in similar situations, there was a good chance Bev might slip up or accidentally reveal a secret in her angry messages. And indeed, she did divulge herself several times in the following weeks. At 4:30 that day, I drove to Bev's workplace parking lot, aiming to arrive before the evening rush. Confirming the absence of security cameras, what I had to do would be swift. Pulling up beside Bev's car, I circled around her, using wire cutters to sever the valve stems on all her tires. Oh, she'd certainly be enraged. And there'd be no fixing them in time to make it home by 6:45. However, it was around 6:35 when she appeared. Evidently, she'd been out with someone, desperate to return home. Having seen receipts for clothing she hadn't brought home, I knew she must have had plenty stashed at her lover's. She must have wanted something else. Slipping out the back door, I hurried to Martha's house, leaving Bev pounding on the front door and shouting. Upon my return that evening, I found my front window shattered, blood splattered around it. After reviewing the porch security footage, I called the police. The video depicted Bev smashing the window with a tire iron, her threats to harm me echoing clear. Unfortunately for her, the lock I'd installed required a key from both sides. As she recoiled, she sliced her forearm deeply, inciting more screams and threats. I promptly reported the incident, and an officer guided me through filing a restraining order. The next morning, Bev was served with papers forbidding her from coming within 500 feet of me or our home. To say she was livid would be an understatement. "What in the world are you doing, idiot?" kicked off her next call, filled with fury and renewed threats. I meticulously recorded the entire conversation. A few hours later, after she had calmed down a bit, she called again. This time, she mentioned sending her friend Lindsay to retrieve some of her belongings that evening. What could she be so desperate to retrieve from the house, I wondered. Suspicions brewing, I agreed to meet Lindsay at 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday. To prepare, I left work a bit early to set up a video camera in my bedroom, with a monitor discreetly installed in my office. Lindsay arrived promptly, and I greeted her warmly. While she packed some clothes into 2 black plastic trash bags, I sat on the bed, observing. Lindsay looked at me nervously, and then requested water from the kitchen. I smiled and left. Upon glancing at the monitor, I noticed Lindsay pulling a shoebox from her closet and placing it into a bag nearby. She then resumed selecting clothes. Upon her return with water, I observed her continuing to pack. She declared that it should suffice, and requested me to take one bag while she took the other, noting that the one she held seemed heavier. I offered to assist Lindsay, but she declined, insisting she was fine and asking me to grab another bag. As she began to fidget and move towards the door with her package, I questioned if there was anything in the package I should be aware of. I grasped her wrist and opened the package, to which she responded anxiously, explaining that it contained clothes and items that Bev needed. Realizing her lie, I confronted Lindsay about the odor emanating from the box, and upon opening it, I found stacks of worn $50 and $100 bills. Accusing her of attempting to steal from me, I rose to my feet and escorted her towards the exit and down the hallway. Lindsay claimed that the money belonged to Bev and that she was merely sent to collect it, denying any intention of theft. However, I pointed out that she came to my house supposedly for clothes, but was leaving with a box of money, which, in my view, constituted theft. Threatening to call the police, I insisted that she prepare to be arrested for robbery. In response, Lindsay pleaded with me not to involve the authorities, citing her children and husband. I seated her on the couch and expressed my disappointment, stating that she would never be welcome in my house again. Despite her protests and tears, I made it clear that if she wished to make amends for her wrongdoing, she had only one chance. You'll leave this house and inform Bev that I caught you stealing. Then you'll report everything you hear or see to me, especially regarding our divorce or her relationship with Sly. You won't divulge anything about our arrangement. Bev made a terrible mistake getting involved with this loser, and you'll ultimately help her leave him. I informed Lindsay that if she cooperated with me, I had the entire incident on video, and I could call the police and file a report against her at any time. Reluctantly, Lindsay agreed to act as my informant. As soon as she departed, I took the box of money and walked to Martha's house at the end of the block. She agreed to conceal it for me until I could safely stash it somewhere beyond Bev's reach. I knew the likely source of the money. Bev's Aunt Mabel, known for her stinginess, passed away a few months ago, leaving Bev as her sole heir. While I knew Aunt Mabel had left Bev a small rural cottage, there was never any mention of money. It seemed that when Bev inspected the cabin after the will reading, she stumbled upon her aunt's hidden cash. When my wife Bev called, enraged and screaming, I recorded the conversation cautiously. "This money is mine, Jack! I want my damn money!" she yelled. "Bev, I'm not sure what you're talking about. I caught Lindsay trying to pilfer money from my nightstand. This is mine." "You know exactly what I'm referring to. The money in the shoebox is mine. It's from Aunt Mabel," I retorted. "Maybe Lindsay found some money in a shoebox, but if so, she likely took it and kept it for herself. I don't have it. And if you had money here unknown to me, you didn't report it on your taxes last year. I've reviewed our tax returns. You're welcome to involve the police, and then we'll inform the IRS about this money, letting them handle your tax evasion," she snapped before hanging up. I felt a need for retaliation. I'd pushed Bev's buttons too hard for her to simply disappear. Restricted by a restraining order from leaving her house, I anticipated she might retaliate against me through my car, considering I'd previously vandalized hers. Hence, I had a dashboard-mounted camera installed, but it wasn't sufficient. If she chose that route, I wanted clear footage. Thus, when I parked in front of the garage on Wednesday morning, I set up an exterior camera. Discreetly positioned, it streamed video to my desk, accessible an hour before lunch. I watched on my laptop as Bev parked behind my car, got out, and began smashing it with a hammer, shattering windows and denting panels. The sight of her breaking the windshield and yelling sent a shiver down my spine. I dialed emergency, and a police car awaited her as she left the driveway. Presenting the video evidence of my damaged Toyota, the authorities arrested Bev, recognizing her actions as a criminal offense. The resisting arrest charge was an added bonus. As she was led away, her pleading eyes met my silent stare. Bev's divorce lawyer phoned me Wednesday, notifying me of a court hearing regarding access to the money withdrawn from our joint accounts. Set for Thursday at 10 a.m., I arrived at 9:50, wondering if Bev had posted bail. She entered with her lawyer, wearing a smug expression. Addressing the judge, her lawyer asserted, "Your Honor, my client was denied access to the shared bank accounts. After she filed for divorce, her husband illicitly emptied them. We're requesting a 50-50 split. Mr. Reynolds, would you like to address the court?" "Yes, Your Honor. My wife, who has been unfaithful, has been withdrawing her own funds from our joint accounts for months. The money I withdrew was fair compensation since I cover rent and bills. She abandoned our marriage to be with her affair partner." Bev rose, objecting. "That's untrue. He drained our savings and checking accounts, leaving me with nothing." Her lawyer intervened, guiding her back to her seat for a brief conference while I presented documents to the judge. "Your Honor, these bank statements cover last year. You'll see highlighted amounts, including Bev's salary, up until a few months ago, along with periodic bonuses. Then, about 6 months ago, her deposits ceased, including bonuses. I have a recorded conversation with her HR confirming her direct deposit switch to her personal account. The total amount diverted from our joint account is significant. It's evident my unfaithful wife possesses substantial wealth obtained from our marriage. The judge scrutinized the bank statements and then addressed Beverly. "Do you have any response, Miss Reynolds?" Her lawyer rose cautiously, stating, "Your Honor, even if my client has personal funds, Mr. Reynolds is still obligated to provide her with her fair share." "Well, counselor, I don't appreciate deceit. Miss Reynolds claimed she was destitute, yet she entered with you. It's clear she was financially supported from marital assets, deceiving her husband and the court. Since Mr. Reynolds covers expenses from his own funds, there's no reason to alter the financial arrangements. Property division will be addressed in the final divorce decree. Case closed." As I left, Bev confronted me in the hallway. I began noting her threats. "Bev, you're violating the restraining order. I'll contact the police if you don't leave. By the way, how was jail? Ready for more time there? You're facing criminal charges." Though she seemed ready to retaliate, I continued toward the exit. She stood, fists clenched, face flushed. Later that evening, I went to a different bar where I had previously encountered an intriguing man named Zeke. Fortunately, he was there. I greeted him and asked if he remembered me, to which he replied that my name wasn't important. Zeke then mentioned that he still had the beat-up car. Expressing his disdain for the car, he explained that his wife had taken the good one when she left with her new lover. He complained about the broken air conditioning and his inability to afford a replacement. I inquired about his car insurance and suggested that if he followed my advice, I might be able to help him get something better. Zeke responded by saying he was listening. "Let's imagine you're driving down 38th Street, and suddenly a gray cat dashes out in front of you. Naturally, you hit the brakes, and there's a chance the lady behind you might rear-end your lousy car at speeds over 15 miles per hour. Your car could end up totaled, but as long as you're firmly against the headrest with your seatbelt on, you should be okay. Insurance will take care of the damages. Plus, you could at least afford a car with air conditioning." "But what if the lady who hits me gets injured? I can't do that to her." "Well, I can assure you she'll be an unfaithful wife, and there won't be anyone else in her car if you follow my instructions. What do you think about that?" "Oh man, that would be great. I can't stand cheaters. And I definitely need to get rid of this car. Park at the corner of 38th and Lessing by 5 p.m. tomorrow. Keep an eye out for a blue Miata leaving the parking lot and heading your way. Pull out in front of it. She doesn't like passing other cars, so drive a block or so until she's tailing you. Then you'll spot a cat darting across the road. Get ready and hit the brakes hard. Just stay in the car. Afterward, dial emergency and mention a possible neck injury. And by the way, we've never met. I won't be back in this bar, and we don't know each other. Dude, I'm colder than the AC in your new car." On Friday, I left work early to meet my daughter at home. As planned, she finished her classes and returned on Sunday evening. We discussed the divorce situation, and I played her a recording of my conversation with her mother about door number 3. Patty was stunned by her mother's ruthless tone and demands. Then, I shared recordings from the past 2 years, revealing a side of Bev she'd never known. "What do you know about the guy Mom's with? Dad? I know he's trouble, and I want you to steer clear of him. If you must meet your mom, make sure it's in a public place. I don't know what he's capable of to get to me. In any case, always have something to protect yourself if there's even a hint he might be around. Patty, I knew your mom and I had our issues, but I never realized the extent of it. What went wrong between us?" This was a question I had anticipated, so I proceeded to offer a condensed version of my viewpoint to Patty. I explained to her that her mother and I had fundamentally different perspectives on marriage. After reflecting on the matter, I conveyed to Patty that I had identified 4 main ways power could be distributed in a relationship. There are instances when neither party takes the lead, resulting in a situation where everything drifts aimlessly like a ship without a rudder. Alternatively, both partners may assume responsibility, leading to constant battles over dominance, or a division of control over different aspects of the relationship. Some couples might even share responsibility equally, which was my expectation going into our relationship. However, things didn't pan out as expected. Another scenario arises when the man assumes full control. While such an arrangement may function under specific circumstances, modern perceptions often view such paternalistic relationships as oppressive to women. Yet, if a man wholeheartedly devotes himself to his wife, it can resemble a fairy tale romance, offering a fulfilling life to a wife with the right temperament, free from the burden of difficult decisions. Alternatively, it could mirror your maternal grandparents' dynamic, where your grandmother was passive and your grandfather was dominant and at times harsh. Your mother likely grew up witnessing this and expected a similar power dynamic in our relationship. Consequently, when I attempted to share equal footing with her, she perceived it as a sign of weakness on my part, leading to increasing disrespect despite my efforts to please her. This leads me to the final scenario, a relationship where the wife dominates. It seems your mom opted to take charge. When I failed to meet her standards of a good person, she turned cruel. She dictated which projects should be completed and insisted they meet her standards. Countless times, she initiated family projects only to micromanage every detail, leaving many unfinished because I couldn't tolerate feeling emasculated in my own home. She even instructed me on how to hold tools while working, making it unbearable. In such cases, when the wife dominates, it goes against human nature. I don't comprehend how this dynamic can function. While a husband may remain loving and affectionate, the wife loses respect for him as she exerts control. I believe this dynamic has manifested in our relationship. As I began to resist, Beverly perceived it as a lack of responsibility on my part. By then, she already viewed me as weak. When I refused to be bossed around, she saw me as a rebellious child. I doubt I'll ever regain her respect. This divorce may be my final opportunity to earn it back. I explained to Patty that she would understand my actions when she realized how difficult it was to assert my intolerance for her mother's lifestyle. I advised her that when making significant decisions in her future relationships, such as starting a family or choosing careers and homes, it was crucial for mutual respect to prevail. I emphasized the importance of both Patty and her partner understanding what to expect to avoid the unhappy situation Beverly and I found ourselves in. In response, Patty assured me that she would keep my advice in mind and promised to consider it. Shortly after, the phone rang. "Mr. Reynolds, this is Memorial Hospital. Your wife was in a car accident. She's stable and not severely injured, but she'll be with us, at least for the night." Patty and I drove to the hospital, and I allowed her to enter the room first. She didn't stay long, and afterward, I requested to speak with Bev alone. When she emerged, wearing a gloomy expression, I suspected Patty had spoken harshly to her. "God, you look terrible, Bev," I remarked with a slight grin. "What a dreadful week, huh? First, you lose your marriage, husband, and home. Then you get served with a restraining order and arrested for a felony. Next, you lose some of your expected money, and now your car is totaled, and you're here in the hospital with a broken wrist and a bruised face from the airbag. Seems like this divorce is turning out much better for me." "Freak you," she retorted. "Oh, Bev, where's your old sly charm? Has he come to visit yet? Don't worry, he's probably busy with one of his other 2 women right now." Her complexion turned pale. "You probably didn't know about the others when you started all this, did you? Well, looks like you know now. I wonder how long it will be before he wants you to serve one of them. I never thought of you as a people pleaser, but that might be a good skill to learn considering how much you'll need it in prison." "I'm not going to jail. My lawyer will get these false charges dropped." "Really? You crash my car and threaten my health, and you think you'll get off easy? Because when I spoke to the DA, he made it clear he's gunning for you. He's got photographic evidence and an upcoming election to win. Now he's aiming to look like a hero cracking down on crime. I believe he'll push for the maximum penalty." She simply sat there, staring at me. "By the way, did you decide which car insurance company to contact?" I asked. "Car insurance? What are you talking about? We still have the same old." "Wait, so you didn't bother getting insurance this week when you filed for divorce?" "I removed your car from my insurance. You must have known about this, considering you insisted on having only your name on your Miata. If you didn't get insurance this week, you're in serious trouble. You'll face fines, towing costs, and 3 years of payments. That Miata may end up in a junkyard while you're still paying for it. And since you won't have a job after your felony conviction, you may not need another car. Plus, you'll likely have to cover the medical bills for the guy you hit, and his insurance company will demand payment for the damages. Damn it. But at least you have your own medical insurance, right?" "I'm on yours." No, I removed you from my health insurance on Monday. Didn't you take care of that too?" "Baby, you're in big trouble. The ambulance ride, ER visit, x-rays, doctor's fees, cast for your arm, hospital stay, and follow-up care will cost thousands and thousands of dollars. Hey, speaking of medicine, the other day, I was reminiscing about when you fell ill a couple of years back. Remember? I took a week off to care for you. I held your head while you were vomiting and cleaned up everything afterward. When you couldn't make it to the bathroom in time, I called the doctor and went to the pharmacy to get you medicine. Then, a week later when you felt better, you started scolding me again, insulting me, and calling me names. I wonder how well old Sly will take care of you next time you're sick. Well, it's time for me to call Sly now that you think he's done with his other woman. I wish you a good life. As I left, Beverly sat there crying, but I didn't care anymore. Everything went on as usual for some time. I kept in touch with Lindsay occasionally. She started worrying about Sly's influence over Bev, and gradually, Lindsay distanced herself from her. Then one evening, as I returned home and headed to my front door, I was attacked on the lawn. I was cautious about possible attacks, but I didn't see this one coming. A guy wearing a ski mask knocked the wind out of me, twisted my arm behind my back, and demanded I give him the box of money and tell the DA to drop the charges. I felt helpless, but still had the car alarm remote in my hand. I pressed the panic button, setting off the alarm. Sly got furious, hit me again, and then ran off quickly as the neighbor's porch lights turned on and people started looking out. I yelled for someone to call emergency, and a police officer arrived a few minutes later. I wasn't injured enough for an ambulance, and Sly was long gone. None of my neighbors could identify him, so he escaped punishment for the attack. An even bigger shock came when I told my daughter about it the next day. Dad, I didn't want to tell you, but I also had an encounter with Sly. Mom called me to talk. I agreed, but insisted we meet away from his apartment. She asked me to pick her up, but when I arrived, she sat me down on their couch. Then Sly came out and talked to me. He said since Mom wasn't coping well with her injuries in bed, I would have to tend to his needs. He claimed she owed him, and I would have to pay for it. I looked at my mother, and she just stared at the floor without saying anything. Sly told me to make her comply. Mom looked at me and pleaded, saying, "Please, baby, stay with him. It won't be that bad, and I really need you to do this for me." He then approached me, grabbed my wrist, and tried to force me to stand up, saying we were going to the bedroom. With my right hand on the pepper spray in my purse, I sprayed it in his face when he pulled me away. He screamed, grabbed his face, and I grabbed my purse, attempting to pull my mother out the door, but she resisted and went toward him. I yelled at her to come with me, but she chose to assist him in the bathroom, so I left. I can't believe my own mom tried to set me up with that idiot. I don't know if I can ever forgive her for this. I was boiling with anger, like any father in my situation. Contemplating my Beretta in the bedroom, I almost reached for it. After a while, my daughter reassured me, confirming she wasn't damaged, and advised me to consider the future. I made Patty promise not to walk alone until after the trial, and always to have protection with her. She agreed to only date fellow students and never be alone in public. Gradually, I regained my composure. Sly urged me to talk to the DA, but he didn't anticipate the conversation I had. I presented a recording of my daughter discussing Sly and reminded him of Sly's attack on me. The DA inquired if I'd consider leniency toward Bev or dropping the charges. Absolutely not. I insisted on seeking the maximum penalty. Bev is under the control of this manipulative person, and separating them is the only way to help her. A stint in prison might straighten her out. The district attorney agreed, and the trial proceeded. I felt fairly confident at home and work, but there were moments of vulnerability, especially when entering or leaving the garage. However, I was cautious during my commute. Our house sits about 10 miles down the ranch road, with only one turnoff in the next 15 miles. I was well aware of other potential danger zones. During the long drive home, I always had my Beretta with me. One evening, a few days before Bev's trial, I noticed headlights of a pickup truck behind me about 2 miles from home, sending shivers down my spine. Soon, it was tailgating me aggressively, just 20 feet from my rear bumper, going 55 miles per hour. I called emergency on my phone and activated the voice recorder. As I accelerated to 70 miles per hour, the pickup kept pace. Frantically, I requested the emergency operator to contact the detective investigating my assault. The truck continued to tail me for another 5 miles as I narrated the situation. With the pistol lying next to me, I prepared for potential danger. As I approached a bridge spanning a small creek bed, I suspected the driver would attempt to force me off the road. Approaching the bridge, about 100 yards away, the pickup accelerated, indicating its intent to force me off the road. I briefly glimpsed Bev's face in the passenger seat as it pulled up beside me. I braked sharply, causing the car to skid, but maintaining control. Although the truck stopped ahead of me, my quick braking prevented a collision. My car slid to a halt by the roadside, its rear resting on a slope leading down to the creek bed. Exiting the car, I grabbed my weapon, phone, and recorder, descending the steep gravel slope beneath the bridge. As I descended, I noticed the pickup's brake lights illuminate. Navigating in the darkness, I cautiously felt my way under the bridge. Despite the risk of encountering a rattlesnake, I was more concerned about other dangers. Breathing heavily, I sought a secure hiding spot, eventually stopping and tilting the Beretta. I waited anxiously, but heard nothing for a while. Cell phone contact with emergency was lost. Attempting to redial in the dark proved futile due to poor signal reception. I was stuck, uncertain if help was on the way. At least the ominous growl of the pickup truck overhead was absent. I resolved to remain stationary, prepared to spend the night there if necessary. It felt like an eternity, but it was probably only 5 or 10 minutes before I heard a siren in the distance, approaching from the same direction as me. Realizing they were far behind, I began walking up the hill, leaving the Beretta under the bridge. Raising my hands as I approached the road, I implored the arriving police not to shoot. Observing 2 cars parked across the road, blocking both lanes, I heard sirens from the other side and saw a pickup truck heading back to the bridge. I stumbled and fell into the mud. While my view was limited, I heard the pickup screech to a stop, and officers ordered the driver to exit and lie on the ground. Other police cars following the pickup stopped behind it. Soon, Bev and Sly were in custody on attempted slaughter charges. Though deeply worried, I returned home, showered, and attempted to sleep to no avail. When your spouse faces multiple felonies, divorce appears remarkably straightforward. The judge expressed sympathy, and Bev and her lawyer offered little resistance. Desperate to minimize her prison sentence, Bev proposed conceding virtually everything in the divorce for assistance in reducing her punishment. During the sentencing hearing, I testified to Bev's prior virtues before falling under Sly's influence. I expressed a willingness to forgive her over time for attempting to end my life. Omitting her likely infidelity and years of torment, I could not interpret her facial expression in court, nor did I speak to her directly. Ultimately, Sly received a lengthy prison sentence. I hope he shares a cell with a burly inmate named Bubba, who finds him particularly appealing. The judge showed more leniency towards Bev, but she won't be eligible for parole for at least 3 years. So it's been approximately 4 years since Bev was incarcerated. The DA's office informed me that she was granted parole about a year ago. I kept waiting to hear from her, knowing she's not in contact with Patty. Revenge seemed promising, but it didn't live up to expectations. I found myself unable to stop dwelling on everything that had unfolded. So, unexpectedly, I reached out to my ex-wife. "Bev, this is Jack. I have something of yours, and I want it back." I phoned the rehab center where Bev resided now. For a few moments, there was no response. "Beverly, I want to give you a shoebox. Can you hear me? Can we arrange to meet so I can return it to you?" I thought she might hang up, but finally she responded, "Where? When? I don't care." We agreed to meet at a neutral location, like a restaurant, or she could come to my house. I suggested Sunday. "Are you free on Sunday?" After a brief silence, she replied, "I'll be there on Sunday." At 2 p.m., the phone rang. How does one prepare to confront their ex-wife, the mother of their child, the woman who attempted to eliminate them, and a convicted felon? I made lemonade and cookies. When Bev arrived, neither of us attempted to shake hands or hug. We exchanged greetings, and I motioned for her to enter the office. Her hair was much shorter than before, and her eyes were stern. She wasn't wearing much, if any, makeup now. At 50 years old, she looked 65. There were drinks, cookies, and a shoebox on the coffee table. She sat down opposite the sofa, and I offered her soft drinks, which she refused. Did she really suspect that I would try to poison her? Well, if you don't want lemonade and cookies, then I suppose all you need is the shoebox and whatever else we have to say to each other. What's the catch, Jack? What do you want instead? Is there anything left? She remained very suspicious. There's no trick, Bev. It's all there. except for a few thousand that I contributed with an equal amount of my own money and gave to Patty as a down payment for her house when she got married. If you wish, she can start returning your share at your convenience. I simply gave her my portion." I could see from Bev's expression that she didn't know Patty was married. Patty has been married for 2 years, and you're already a grandmother. I sensed the tension in her eyes as she struggled with her emotions. The little girl's name is Shannon Beverly Evans. Shannon is the name of her other grandmother. Bev's eyes filled with tears despite her best efforts. "Bev, I know you haven't spoken to Patty in a while. There must be a way for you to reconnect. If you want, I can facilitate that." Beverly nodded, tears now streaming down her cheeks. I reached for the box of tissues I had placed on the coffee table. "I'll give you the abridged version of our story if you're not ready to leave just yet," I said gently. She wiped tears from her cheek and tried to compose herself. "Patty found a great guy named Stan Evans. He's into computers and networks. They seem to click really well. She's a fantastic mom, and they're deeply devoted to each other. Martha and I didn't last long. She's too young for me, and she just needed me temporarily until she could get her life back on track. She found someone else and moved on. I date occasionally, but I end things if it gets too serious. I'm better off solo. I'll stick to being single." There was silence for a while. "I'm going to share some thoughts, mainly for my own benefit, but maybe you can glean something useful from them too. I hope so. I couldn't wait to see you in prison. I loathed you and wished you dead many times, but when they locked you up, my feelings started to shift. I found I couldn't revel in my victory anymore, so I let go of my hatred for you, even though you never asked for it. I forgave you because I know you're not entirely to blame. I couldn't understand you until it was too late, and we stopped communicating. We were just bickering." Beverly composed herself and looked up from the floor. She gave me a lost look but remained silent. "That's the truth, succinctly and plainly. If you have nothing more to say, and if you're not hungry, I won't keep you any longer. You probably have important things to attend to." She stood up and took the box as she headed toward the front door. For the first time since I pushed her away all those years ago, I called out to her, "Beverly, it doesn't matter now, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I'm curious. Throughout our time together, especially on that last day you were here, it was clear that you saw me as weak. Do you still think I'm a pushover, Bev?" She paused with her hand on the doorknob and glanced back at me. She expressed her feelings bitterly, stating that she hated me and believed I had been cruel, asserting that I had ruined her life. After a moment of pause, she added that she didn't consider me to be a pushover. Following this statement, she disappeared from my life permanently.
One evening, I sat at our table reviewing my daughter Katie's medical forms. Katie was gearing up for kindergarten, so the pediatrician conducted a thorough checkup. Meanwhile, my wife left her school forms spread out on the table. Glancing lazily, I noticed the letter that shattered my marriage. In the blood type column, it read A. I was frozen for about 10 seconds. I had no clue. Retrieving 2 sheets of paper from our medical records, I confirmed everything matched my recollection. Last summer, both my wife and I donated blood to the Red Cross, receiving receipts indicating our blood types. Here on 2 sheets of paper, mine was B and hers was O. So there was no way Katie could be my daughter. If my wife was her mother and I witnessed Marie give birth to her, then someone with blood type A had to be the father. The kids were already asleep, and Marie was upstairs watching TV. I grabbed a beer from the refrigerator and sat in the backyard pondering, how did my marriage fare? I'd say, okay, pretty typical. Both good and bad. Depends on what day you ask. During our courtship and early marriage, Marie and I were passionately in love. We were lovemaking constantly, sometimes wildly, even beyond the bedroom. We were always touching, holding hands, walking hand in hand, stroking each other's neck or back as we passed by. Of course, over time, it faded away. Doesn't that happen in every marriage? But now, with proof of her infidelity smacking me right between the eyes, everything I had ever thought about our marriage was on shaky ground. I sat and pondered. What changed? Gradually or suddenly? It seemed like both. The decline in our bed life was gradual for a while. But about 6 years ago, a few months before Katie was conceived, there were some odd months. Marie, my open and loving wife, was acting very strange. One evening she returned from work quite late, briefly allowed me to kiss her tenderly, immediately went to the shower, and avoided me for the rest of the evening. The next morning was just as cold and unceremonious. But that night she became completely different. She came home early, cooked a special dinner, tucked me into bed early, and made love to me with an eagerness and passion that I thought we had lost. We hugged happily before going to bed. And Marie told me how much she loved me. Several more times this week we had passionate lovemaking. Then the cold night soon happened again. She returned late from work, didn't say a word to me, and quickly took a shower. For the next 2 months, I hardly knew who I married. Marie was passionate and loving. Marie was cold. Marie was attentive. Marie was distant and preoccupied. Marie was patient. Marie was irritable and hot-tempered. I asked her several times if anything had happened, Ed, if something between us was bothering her, if there were problems at work. But the only response I received was, "I don't know, Bill. I'm probably just a little nervous. Sorry." When things finally got back to normal after 3 months or so, it was much less pleasant than at the beginning of our marriage. Marie's demeanor shifted, becoming less volatile, yet she seldom displayed affection, and interest in lovemaking waned. Closeness occurred scarcely, maybe once a week, sometimes stretching to a fortnight, only upon my insistent request. Any subtle hint, like suggesting we spend the evening together, met with firm rejection. I had to explicitly mention the long hiatus since our last encounter. Marie would comply reluctantly, but it was evident she considered it a favor. Do all marriages follow such a melancholic course? It was the only marriage I knew, so I couldn't say. Naturally, I pondered the cause, entertaining the notion of infidelity. However, Marie soon became pregnant, and our anticipation of the future baby, coupled with the joy of having Katie, eclipsed most of my concerns about our relationship. After Katie's birth, fatigue consumed us, making Marie's disinterest in lovemaking more understandable, though I remained dissatisfied. When Katie turned 3, Marie conceived again, and we welcomed Brian just after Katie's 4th birthday. Bill and Marie, once passionate partners, transformed into parents of 2 delightful yet exhausting children. We cherished our kids. Despite realizing my discontent with our marriage and our minimal bed life, I didn't acknowledge it then. Perhaps I believed it was typical for couples with young children. Armed with the shocking revelation that my daughter wasn't biologically mine, the events from 6 years ago didn't seem as enigmatic. Marie likely initiated an affair around that time. It clarified her distant behavior and sudden showers. The subsequent passionate closeness and warmth could be attributed to guilt or, if I were charitable, an effort to maintain marital harmony while continuing the affair. As I sat in the yard under the darkening sky, my initial shock transformed into seething anger. My beloved wife not only betrayed me, but also bestowed another man's child upon me. Perhaps even Brian wasn't mine. If my sole intent then was to punish Marie, I would have stormed inside, presented the evidence of blood types, coerced her confession, and expelled her deceitful self onto the street. But it wasn't that simple. I cherished my children regardless of their biological origins. If we divorced, Mary would likely gain custody once the truth emerged. I contemplated. I asked myself, what do I desire? The answers were surprisingly lucid. Firstly, I yearned to uncover Marie's actions in detail. Was it a brief affair? Did she know Katie wasn't mine? Or was she aware of everything, engaging in a clandestine affair for years? Secondly, I resolved to raise my children as my own, shielding them from the truth of their parentage. Once I established my objectives, mapping out how to achieve them surprisingly felt straightforward. Upon returning home, I noticed cotton swabs leading to each of the children's rooms. I carefully obtained swabs from inside their cheeks without disturbing their sleep, wrapping each one separately. I designated Katie as number 2 and Brian as number 3. Then I headed to the kitchen where I affixed a tampon to my cheek and marked it as number 1. Having a friend employed in a university chemistry lab, I arranged for DNA testing, marking the initial phase of information collection. Upon receiving the first results, my subsequent actions became clear. A week later, my friend contacted me, unaware of whose samples they were. I informed him of acquaintances sharing the same last name, speculating on distant relations. "Hi, Bill," he began. "Your numbers 2 and 3 are undoubtedly siblings, while number 1 is unrelated to them. It seems these individuals aren't your cousins, after all." I expressed gratitude before hanging up. So Katie and Brian were indeed siblings, sharing the same parents. Marie had 2 children with this mysterious man. But did she know? Surely she knew she was involved with him, but was she aware he fathered our children? There was a simple way to find out. I approached Marie in the kitchen, initiating the conversation without turning around. She encouraged me to continue. A colleague of mine has a biologist friend conducting DNA research, requiring samples from related individuals. I volunteered to provide samples from you, me, and each of the children. I'll handle the kids before bedtime, and then we'll do ours. Sound good? I observed Marie closely as I explained. Halfway through, she tensed, nearly dropping a pan. She regained composure and continued washing. After I finished, there was a moment of silence before she turned to face me. I'm not entirely comfortable with this idea, Bill. How do we know what the biologist will do with the samples? Can we trust our information will remain confidential? I began to counter her concerns, but she abruptly objected. No, I'm not keen on this idea. Please inform your colleague we won't participate. All right, honey, I replied softly. Regardless, it was fine. Her reaction told me all I needed to know. My next move was to unearth details about her affair or affairs. Who, where, and when, perhaps even why. It was plausible that Marie had concealed something within our house. That could provide a clue. But I require sufficient time to conduct a thorough search. That Saturday, we had plans to visit her parents' house for the afternoon. A few minutes before our departure time, I entered the bedroom, dialed our home number on my cell phone, then pretended to engage in a conversation with my boss at work. Upon completing the call, I approached Marie. Honey, I apologize, but there's a crisis at work and they urgently need me for at least 4 hours today. Otherwise, the company will face serious issues. Damn it, Bill. My parents are eager to see their grandchildren. I understand, I reassured her. I'm truly sorry. You go ahead. Just convey my apologies. You and the kids will have a good time. I'll prepare myself some dinner, and I'll see you in the evening. She accepted the change in plans without further objection, and soon found herself in the car with the children. Now I had ample time to systematically search the house. I concluded that searching in the usual spots where I frequent would be futile since Marie was unlikely to hide anything there. Therefore, I bypassed the kitchen, bookshelves, living room, and so forth. I also disregarded my bedroom and bathroom areas, but thoroughly inspected all sections of her closet and dresser drawers. The discovery that caught me off guard was a pair of very alluring lingerie pieces that I had never seen her wear. They were discreetly tucked away in the back corner beneath everyday items, suggesting her desire to keep them concealed from me. Only the children's rooms and the attic remained unsearched. Reasoning that the children's rooms were less probable, I ascended into the attic. There, I found various forgotten pieces of furniture, a couple of lamps, and several boxes of items predating our wedding. With so much to inspect, I decided to focus on the 3 boxes situated to the side. One of them appeared less dusty than the others, indicating recent handling. Upon closer examination, I observed that these boxes had been moved more recently compared to the rest of the attic clutter, which seemed untouched for years. Consequently, I directed my attention to these 3 boxes and uncovered everything I sought. They contained Marie's old possessions, predominantly letters from college friends and acquaintances. Among these items, I discovered a collection of letters and mementos from myself, including affectionate greeting cards. Deep within one of the boxes, strategically hidden beneath aged papers, lay a slim stack of more recent notes and 2 unlabeled videotapes. Retrieving them, I brought them downstairs for further scrutiny. A mere 20 minutes spent reviewing the notes provided me with nearly all the information I needed. It became apparent that Marie had been unfaithful to me with Harry, her office boss. The affair seemingly commenced about 3 months prior to Katie's conception, coinciding with the period when Marie exhibited unusual and erratic behavior at home. All the letters were from Harry to Marie, and they were harsh and forceful. There was no affection in them, just a lot of desire. Right from the start, their relationship seemed almost like a dominant, submissive dynamic, with Harry dictating terms. Some letters instructed her on how to dress for specific occasions. In others, he detailed exactly how they would engage in closeness the next time they stayed late at work. A few notes congratulated her on the birth of their children and derisively referred to me as a naive fool who, unknowingly, was raising his offspring. It was evident he had no intention of acknowledging his children. I knew he was happily married to a woman named Caroline, and they had 3 children of their own. Apparently, Caroline was oblivious to his affair just as I was. My jaw clenched as I read. It was clear Harry held sway over Marie, but she willingly acquiesced. There was no suggestion of coercion or blackmail. She seemed to relish playing this role for him and being directed. Moreover, it was apparent they both knew the true paternity of Marie's children, and they seemed to revel in the clandestine knowledge they held over me. From these letters, I couldn't glean much about Marie. However, there was now no doubt she had been deceiving me for over 6 years and intentionally conceiving children with another man while masquerading as my loving spouse. I had been seething with anger for days, but these letters fueled it further. My plans for retribution would also encompass Harry. After a moment's pause, I took the tapes to the VCR and began to watch. Both depicted Harry and Marie engaged in lovemaking acts. The earlier one, judging by Marie's hairstyle, seemed to be filmed in an unfamiliar room, possibly Harry's residence. The more recent one was filmed in my own bedroom. I wondered when Marie had the opportunity for this. It occurred to me that I had taken several business trips over the past year, and perhaps she had left the children with her parents during those times. Overall, the recordings confirmed Harry's carnal dominance over Marie and her enthusiastic compliance. The lighting wasn't bright, but they were both clearly visible, and the sound quality was remarkably clear. I could hear every word, every moan on the first tape. Right from the start of their affair, I heard Harry issuing commands. He sat on the bed and instructed Marie to perform a seductive striptease, which she did with a smile. The closeness was rough, lacking gentleness or affection, and his language was coarse. It saddened me to see that Marie clearly enjoyed what she was receiving. The second tape featured similar lovemaking scenes, but with some new intriguing dialogue. They were lying on the bed. Marie asked Harry why he didn't mind me raising his children, and he responded, "Bill is decent enough, and as you say, he's fond of children. I have 3 of my own, and I don't really care beyond that. If it weren't for that," he continued, "I would have told you to leave him long ago. What does he offer besides changing diapers?" "That's not fair, Harry," Marie replied. "Bill is a good and kind person. He genuinely loved me and provided for me and the children. And that's why you let me have my fun with you all these years, right?" She smiled at him and playfully hit his arm. "You've never been as gentle and caring as Bill, and that's probably why I'm so drawn to you." "Yes, baby, I give you what you want," he replied. "Now let's get on with it before I have to leave." After finishing both films, I sat down and pondered how arrogant they both were, not only to write these letters, but also to be careless enough to leave them and Harry's notes where I could discover them. My retaliation will be complete, directed at both of them. I utilized a scanner to digitize each note onto my hard drive. Then, employing sophisticated software borrowed from work for a project I had undertaken last summer, I transformed each videotape into a digital file on my hard drive for future editing. After finishing, I stowed the records and tapes in the trunk of my car, concealing them beneath the spare tire. Lastly, I tidied up the attic, meticulously restoring everything to its original place to ensure Marie remained unaware of my presence. Over the ensuing 2 weeks, I methodically devised and executed my schemes. Surprisingly, it was far easier than anticipated for me to be utterly deceptive towards Marie, behaving as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. I realized she had been deceiving me for 6 years, so why should I struggle to reciprocate? Thus, I remained kind and affectionate, attending to the children's needs, showing Marie the same tenderness as before, and even initiating closeness on a couple of occasions. However, I did so cautiously, making it easier for her to decline. Truthfully, I had no desire to touch her again. A significant event loomed in Marie's life. She had been elected as the new president of the Key Society, a prominent charity in our city, and was set to assume office at a luncheon where she would deliver a speech outlining the charity's plans for the upcoming year. Having served on the Key Society board for 3 years, Marie was deeply honored by her appointment as president. Nervous about her presentation, she sought my assistance in crafting the PowerPoint she intended to use. This presented a golden opportunity for me. For about a week, I collaborated with her every evening, allowing her to showcase her slides and other materials while helping her organize them into a cohesive presentation. She rehearsed this routine several times in the month leading up to her big day, and each rehearsal went smoothly. Simultaneously, I prepared my own entirely distinct PowerPoint presentation, poised to replace hers. The night before the luncheon, I deleted Marie's file and substituted it with mine. Additionally, I added a password so that once the file began running, she wouldn't be able to disable it. All that remained was to ensure that Marie had invited Harry and his wife to the luncheon. I casually inquired, and she confirmed they would be attending on the appointed evening. I felt as excited as Marie, albeit for different reasons. Arriving early, Marie, resplendent in a sleek black evening gown, looked breathtaking. I assisted her in setting up the laptop and conducted a couple of tests to ensure smooth playback. We all savored a delightful dinner and listened to some introductory speeches. Marie was warmly introduced by the outgoing president, and she approached the podium appearing shy yet proud. As applause filled the room, she began speaking and initiated the PowerPoint presentation. Initially, it proceeded as expected, showcasing photos of the Society's charitable endeavors and financial data. Then, according to my plan, it took an unexpected turn. Suddenly, a series of still images appeared, frames I had extracted from 2 videos depicting a couple engaged in various carnal positions. Though some photos were dimly lit, the overall impression of 10 or 12 of them confirmed they featured Marie and Harry. For a few minutes, Marie continued discussing key social issues. However, she noticed the sudden murmur from the audience, prompting her to glance at the screen behind her. Gasping, she accidentally knocked over a glass of water onto the podium. Momentarily frozen in shock, she then flushed crimson with embarrassment, frantically attempting to halt the presentation by pressing buttons on her laptop. By then, the still photos had transitioned into brief video clips. "How will you prevent Bill from discovering I'm carrying your child? As long as I let him have his way occasionally, he won't suspect anything," Harry's voice declared. "But not too often, baby, you're mine." The room erupted in noise. Laughter and cheers reverberated from every table. Marie stood in disbelief, too stunned to even feel embarrassed. Nearby, Caroline, Harry's wife, seized a vase of flowers, smashed it over Harry's head, and stormed out amid the commotion. Gradually, the guests dispersed from the ballroom, exchanging gestures and reliving the astonishing scene. Surprisingly soon, Marie and I were alone. She stood defeated and bewildered on the podium, while I sat at a table 10 feet away, wearing a broad smile and gazing up at her. Finally, she met my eyes with a look of profound sadness. "Bill, how could you betray me like this? I thought you loved me." Given the circumstances, her question struck me as absurd. I couldn't help but burst into laughter before exiting the room. Still, no, not at all. It was merely a fanciful notion. The entire town would soon learn Harry was the father of my children, potentially leading to their loss in the divorce. Moreover, they would likely resent being labeled as Marie's illegitimate offspring. No, I should have been more discreet, and I acted first. I consulted a divorce lawyer, having met him previously, and prepared documents for future use. Then, I crafted the precise PowerPoint presentation I had described. However, I didn't wait until Marie's scheduled dinner to unveil it. Instead, I arranged for Marie to view it herself. One evening, 4 weeks before the dinner event, after the children had gone to bed, I called Marie. "Honey, I'd like you to take a look at the draft of the PowerPoint I prepared for your speech next month." "Can it wait, Bill?" she snapped, visibly exhausted. "I'm absolutely spent today." "No, dear," I asserted firmly. "I need to review what changes are necessary so I can address them promptly. Please remember that I dedicate my free time to these tasks for your benefit." With that, I escorted her into the office and seated her in front of the computer. "Simply press A when you're ready, and the file will commence on its own," I instructed, inwardly smiling. I monitored her closely. Initially, everything proceeded smoothly as she rehearsed her remarks on the initial slides about the society. Then, her demeanor shifted abruptly. She gasped, her face draining of color as she beheld still images of herself and Harry engaged in love-making acts. She turned to me, mouth agape, but uttered no sound. I maintained a neutral expression. Next, video clips surfaced, featuring conversations about his paternity of her children and his deliberate deception of me, interspersed with more lovemaking scenes. Despite Marie's frantic attempts to halt the file, I prevented it, and the screen went dark. This sequence lasted about 2 minutes. Marie slumped in the chair, head bowed. She couldn't muster the courage to meet my gaze. Quietly relishing her distress, I waited. Eventually she spoke, lifting her head to look at me. In that moment, she appeared to age 20 years. "Bill! Me? I don't... Oh, Bill, I'm so sorry," she cried. "I truly am. Can you ever forgive me?" "Forgive you?" I responded coldly. "For what? Let's see, for carrying on an affair with Harry Dorner for the past 6 years of our marriage, for bearing his children and deceiving me into believing they were mine, for mocking and disparaging me behind my back, for refusing closeness at Harry's behest. Is that what you want forgiveness for?" Her sobs intensified. "Bill, I don't love him. It's you I love, always have," she sobbed. My anger remained icy, contained. I said nothing, but inwardly thought, "No, Marie, that's nonsense. You love our comfortable life together. You enjoy my devotion, my care for the children, but you don't love me. No woman who loves her husband would betray him as you have." I reclined and allowed her tears to flow. I took satisfaction in her anguish, maintaining silence throughout the 20 minutes it took her to cry. Eventually, she sobbed several times, wiped her tear-streaked face, and looked at me. "What will you do, Bill? Are you going to divorce me?" "No, Marie, I won't do that," I lied. "I care too much about Katie and Brian, even if they aren't biologically mine." I let the statement hang in the air briefly before continuing. "But things will be drastically different from now on. You can count on that. Let's begin immediately. Summon that idiot Harry and tell him to be here in 15 minutes. Horror flickered across her face. "But I can't do that. He's at home with his wife and children." "He won't come," she protested. I smiled. "Say whatever you must, but summon him here. Inform him that if he fails to arrive within 15 minutes, his marriage will be dissolved by tomorrow." She glanced at me, perhaps apprehensive of the coldness in my expression. Then, without uttering another word, she headed to the kitchen and contacted her paramour. When Harry arrived, he offered the soft, insincere smile I anticipated. Marie must have briefed him on the situation, as he appeared anxious and uneasy. "Come into the office and have a seat, Harry. And you too, Marie. We need to discuss something," I directed. Once we were all seated, I wasted no time. "All right, Harry. Here's the deal. You've been enjoying yourself with Marie for quite some time, making a fool out of me. That ends now. Everything has changed, and it's time for you to face the consequences." Before he could respond, I interjected. "Sit, watch, and listen." I navigated through the PowerPoint presentation, relishing Harry's horrified reaction to its contents. When the presentation concluded, an unsettling silence ensued. I think I relished it more than they did. "Now you will do as I say, precisely as I say, or your blissful marriage to Caroline will come to a sudden and public end. Understood? Don't speak. Just nod your head." He begrudgingly complied, wearing a scowl. "Good. Now listen up and keep your mouth shut. I have several documents for you to sign. I'll give them to you one by one. You might want your lawyer to review them, so I'm giving you 48 hours to return them to me, signed, or Caroline will be treated to a brief viewing of a certain video. The first document acknowledges that you are the biological father of Katie and Brian, and commits you to paying child support for them until they turn 21, plus a lump sum for college. The amounts are specified here: $10,000 per child per year, along with $100,000 per child in their first year of college. The funds will be placed in a trust fund for which I am the sole trustee, authorized to utilize it as needed for the children's welfare." Harry leapt from his seat in fury. "Listen, Bill, this is utter nonsense. I have no intention—" I forcefully pushed him back into the chair. "Shut your mouth, Harry. We both know you're wealthy. This isn't your show anymore, it's mine. You have no say. Now keep quiet until I permit you to speak." I noticed Marie looking at me across the room, a mix of horror and disbelief on her face. This was a facet of her loving husband she had never witnessed before. "The second document grants me permission to adopt the children. Both you and Marie must sign it. I'll ask her to do so once you've returned it to me. The third is a declaration renouncing your parental rights to Katie and Brian and vowing never to disclose your paternity. Lastly, this is a personal admission of workplace carnal intimidation against my wife by you." "What?" Harry sprang up again. "That's a complete lie. She wanted it as much as I did." "Sit down, Harry," I commanded solemnly. "Perhaps, but Marie will still sign a carnal intimidation complaint against you. It's one of my conditions to refrain from divorcing her." "Clear, Marie?" I inquired, turning to her. Marie gazed from me to Harry, her expression fraught with fear. She remained silent. "Allow me to elucidate," I addressed them both. "I have no intention of utilizing any of these documents. They serve as my insurance, Harry, in the event you consider shirking your financial responsibilities to your two children, or entertain the notion of disclosing their true paternity." I handed Marie the carnal intimidation complaint drafted by my lawyer. "Sign it, Marie." Still visibly frightened, she silently accepted the pen from my hand and affixed her signature to the complaint at the bottom. "Now, Harry, we're nearing the end of today's meeting. I expect those signed documents back in my possession within 48 hours. You can bring them here to the house. And if you ever entertain any dark, insane notions like injuring me, rest assured that several copies of your incriminating notes and love letters to Marie are securely stored, with instructions for their exposure should anything happen to me." With a tone of contempt, I concluded, locking eyes with him. Taking Marie's hand, I guided her back into the office and seated her. I had never seen her like this before. She trembled with horror. "It's all right, Marie. I would never damage you. There's no need to be afraid." "My God, Bill, what's gotten into you? How could you do this to Harry?" she exclaimed. I regarded her with some surprise. "You don't understand, Marie. Don't you see what he's done to you, to us? It's despicable and unjust." She blushed. "Yes, I see. It's just, you seem so angry, like you've lost control." Having no immediate response, I remained silent for a moment. "Marie, I've told you I won't divorce you, but our marriage won't continue the same way. From now on, things will be drastically different. Do you understand?" "Yes, Bill. I'll do anything to make things right. What have I done to you?" she pleaded. "All right," I relented. "Let's establish a couple of conditions. Within 2 weeks, you'll find a new job. I won't tolerate you seeing Harry every day at work. And it goes without saying, you'll have no personal contact with him ever again. No touching, kissing, lovemaking, calls, emails, nothing. Furthermore, if our marriage persists, it'll be on a wholly new basis. I refuse to endure your bad moods, your aloofness. I expect you to be a joyful, kind, loving wife every day. Your actions will demonstrate your love for me and your gratitude for our marriage. That same wild, passionate closeness you shared solely with Harry, I expect to share with me now. I anticipate seeing you in the hot lingerie I've never witnessed, tucked away in your drawer." I glanced at her pointedly, and she averted her gaze in shame. "And I expect you to be eager and willing whenever I desire closeness. If you truly love me, Marie, you have much lost time to compensate for." She crossed the room and knelt at my feet, embracing my legs tightly and looking up at me. "I love you, Bill, more than words can express. I'll prove it to you, I promise." I observed her tear-stained face, her frightened eyes. Somewhere within me, fragments of the love and devotion I held for this woman lingered, yet they were overshadowed, rendered insignificant by my fury at her selfishness and deceit. She deserved whatever consequences awaited her. Softening my tone slightly, I said, "Listen, Marie, in 4 weeks, your social dinner will take place. Let's use these weeks to start anew, to forge something different, perhaps even better from our marriage. If all goes well, the dinner will be a celebration of our new beginning. What do you say?" She nodded, holding onto my legs tightly. "Yes, Bill. Thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance. I'll be whatever you need me to be." I drew her close, and she showered me with tears and kisses. "Give me 10 minutes to freshen up, and then I'll start making things right," she said, rising with a smile. After she left, I relaxed in my chair, amused as I watched Marie bend over backward to please me. The next 4 weeks were bound to be enjoyable. I was a bit surprised she didn't notice what I didn't do, ask her anything about the affair's details. The whole evening must have been such a shock that she didn't have time to dwell on it. But honestly, I didn't ask because I simply didn't care. I was finished with Marie, even if she didn't realize it yet. Entering the bedroom minutes later, I found the bed made, the lights dimmed, and Marie lying in a revealing red nightgown. She had freshened up, looking as stunning as ever, albeit visibly nervous. I noticed a bottle of lube on the nightstand. "Where are you?" she purred, her voice trembling slightly. "Come to me." I joined her, shedding my clothes, and we embraced, kissing passionately. Her body was eager, and she moved with excitement. Whether it was genuine or an act, I enjoyed it. Despite my anger toward Marie, I found myself immersing in pleasure with her. She had a beautiful body, and her impatience was exhilarating, especially after years of indifference. I lay back and let her take charge, which she seemed happy to do. Afterward, she turned off the light and cuddled up to me under the blanket. She kissed my neck gently and whispered, "Sleep well." Drifting off, I anticipated receiving similar attention over the next 4 weeks. I genuinely enjoyed the subsequent weeks as Marie dedicated herself to rebuilding our marriage. The next morning, she woke me with a cheerful smile and a loving kiss, offering some love-making morning pleasure. Before breakfast, I watched with interest as Marie went above and beyond her usual routine to prepare the children for their day. That evening, I returned home to an unusual meal Marie had decided to cook from a cookbook recipe. Though the kids weren't fans, I enjoyed it, and Marie took charge to ensure they bathed and went to bed on time so we could enjoy our evening. Our nightly encounters were a refreshing change. Marie wore another enticing nightgown, and we indulged in unhurried closeness. Her enthusiasm, affection, and energy remained consistent. Despite my inner turmoil, I couldn't help but observe how we portrayed a happy newlywed couple each day. Marie's affection remained steadfast. She exuded cheerfulness and assistance in the mornings, and she was equally playful with our children and love-making moments. The allure of new, seductive lingerie gained my full endorsement, and we explored several exciting new positions, finding some to be thoroughly satisfying. My life resembled a joyful illusion, though I harbored no trust in my wife, seething with anger beneath my facade of contentment, merely feigning reciprocal affection. Harry's signed papers arrived promptly in my mailbox, followed by Marie's swift consent to adoption, facilitated by my lawyer. That same week, he orchestrated a private hearing with a judge, and within 10 days, the legal adoption was finalized. Subsequently, my lawyer handled the divorce proceedings. One morning at work, Denise Reynolds, a colleague with whom I occasionally collaborated, paid me an unexpected visit. At 28, she was 5 years my junior and undeniably attractive. While her occasional flirtatious remarks hadn't caught my serious attention before, she was definitely someone I considered in my circle of potential partners. To my surprise, Denise's visit wasn't work-related. "Bill," she said, "you seem different lately. Have you been working out or something? You look younger or fitter." "Thanks for noticing, Denise," I replied with a smile, then impulsively added, "Actually, it's something else entirely, but not something I can discuss here. Perhaps we could grab lunch today?" "Sounds good," she agreed. We went to the salad bar, then took our lunches to a table in the park and enjoyed the sun while we ate. "The change you've noticed is probably due to the fact that my marriage is falling apart," I explained. She looked puzzled. "And this makes you look better? Explain, please." I offered her a condensed version of my situation, admitting, "My wife has been cheating on me with a coworker for some time now. I intervened, but I've already made up my mind to leave her in a few weeks. Meanwhile, she's treating me like royalty, both in and out of the bedroom. That's the difference you've noticed today." Denise regarded me thoughtfully. "I'm impressed with how you're handling it," she remarked. "When I found out about my ex's infidelity, I nearly fell apart. It took me months to regain my composure." "I'm sorry to hear that," I responded. "I didn't know you went through something similar. But right now, I'm taking charge of my situation. It's going to unfold on my terms, not someone else's. That's what's keeping me going." Once again muttering, "What the hell," to myself, I remarked that one of the perks of my situation was knowing that although I wasn't officially single yet, I soon would be. Consequently, I felt no need to hold back my admiration for the delightful lady beside me in the park. I glanced at her with a smile, causing her to blush slightly before looking away and then back at me. "Gosh, Bill, you've put me in a bit of a spot here. I didn't realize it was so straightforward," she said. "I'm sorry, Denise, but you're just so lovely and amusing. I've been drawn to you since we first met. It's just that, until now, it felt taboo to bring it up. Any chance you'd join me for dinner on Saturday? I know this charming little Italian spot with a view of the river," I proposed. She regarded me earnestly. "Bill, I like you too, and being with you has always been effortless. Can I trust you? Is your marriage truly over, or is this just a ploy to get into my pants? Forgive me, but I've been through this scenario before." "Denise, I've always been honest with you, and as you're aware, I've never made advances before. I'm ending things with Marie in about 2 weeks and filing for divorce the same day. There's no turning back now, but I'll understand if you want to push me away. I'll just be a tad disappointed," I confessed. She smiled. "No, Bill. Since you've made the offer, I'm ready to accept it before you change your mind." Her gaze met mine intensely, and after a brief hesitation, I leaned forward, and we shared a gentle, tender kiss. It wasn't fiery or passionate, but it felt like a beautiful promise. Afterward, I beamed at her like an ecstatic child. When I informed my wife of my plans for a date on Saturday night, it brought out the worst in me. I made it crystal clear that I'd be going out with another woman and expected her to stay home with the kids. "Bill," Marie was shocked, on the verge of tears. "But I've tried so hard. Think of something to salvage our marriage. How can you see someone else?" "It's simple, Marie. Not only did you see someone else, but you also had an affair with him behind my back for 6 years. You've been making an effort lately, and I appreciate that. But it doesn't mean you automatically deserve my unwavering loyalty. It's pretty evident that I'll need to find happiness elsewhere for a while before we can even consider reconciliation," I retorted. She began to cry softly. "Will you sleep with her?" she asked. "No, but I can. And that's something you'll have to come to terms with. If it hurts you, maybe it'll help you understand the pain you've caused me," I concluded, ending the conversation as I left the room. My initial outings with Denise were delightful, yet cautious, as we both proceeded with care. We savored the moments, sensing there was more than mere physical attraction between us. We conversed, laughed, vented about co-workers, shared childhood stories, and simply grew acquainted. It felt natural and effortless, occasionally evoking memories of my early days with Marie, a thought I tried to push aside despite the pang of sadness it brought. Following our third dinner together, as I opened Denise's car door outside her apartment, she softly inquired, "Do you want to come in?" We understood the implication, and instantly, desire surged through me. Upon entering, she embraced me eagerly, and we kissed and hugged passionately, like infatuated teenagers. She paused for a moment, pulling back slightly, and expressed, "Seriously, I really want this, Bill, but I'm quite nervous. It's been a while. Please be gentle and patient with me." "Of course," I reassured her with a smile, lifting her gently. "Which way to your bedroom?" Closeness with Denise was remarkable, yet markedly different from my recent experiences with Marie. Initially reserved, Denise allowed me to explore and caress her body at my own pace. Despite her initial shyness, her beauty captivated me, and every moment with her was cherished. Our first encounter was tender, unhurried, and brimming with affection, a stark contrast to the passionate encounters I shared with Marie. It felt like two individuals genuinely caring for each other and finding happiness together. Afterward, Denise kissed me tenderly and asked if I could stay the night, to which I gladly agreed, and we drifted off to sleep wrapped in each other's arms. The following morning, Denise seemed slightly embarrassed again, and though we refrained from lovemaking, we bid farewell with sincere tenderness, exchanging several tender kisses. With only a few days remaining until my impending wedding night with Marie, I chose not to divulge my plans to Denise, but assured her of my imminent divorce proceedings. Upon returning home around 9:30 that Saturday morning, I found Marie quietly weeping at the kitchen table, clearly aware of how I had spent the previous night. Though I feigned sympathy more than I truly felt, I tenderly embraced her. "I'm sorry, Marie. I understand how you're feeling, believe me." "Oh, Bill, this is just awful. The mere thought of you with another woman tears me apart. I've been so selfish all these years. How could I not consider your feelings and the impact of my actions?" Looking at me, she added, "Thank you. Thank you for giving me another chance." Marie's own significant night, much like mine, was fast approaching, and to some extent I couldn't help but feel a twinge of regret. The past 4 weeks with Marie, including the fulfilling closeness we shared, had been memorable, and I would miss them. However, nothing she did manage to quell my resentment and fury. Her profound betrayal exceeded any attempt at reconciliation. Upon reflection, my heart harbored only a minuscule amount of love for her and a scant drop of sympathy for her impending fate. While collaborating on a PowerPoint presentation for her speech, I clandestinely crafted my own rendition. It wasn't identical to hers. I needed to conceal Harry's identity as the children's father. Nevertheless, the overall strategy remained unchanged. Using a sequence of photographs and captivating videos, I arranged the laptop so that Marie's presentation would appear whenever she used it. Yet, with a specific key combination, notably including, "of course," I could lock her presentation and substitute it with my own special file. In the days leading up to the event and on the evening itself, Marie nervously inquired if I had erased the dreadful file she encountered 4 weeks earlier. With a tender smile each time, I reassured her it was gone. I would then demonstrate that her presentation was intact and would seamlessly play with a simple click. The final days at home were particularly bittersweet. Marie seemed increasingly convinced she was regaining my affection, her devoted gestures appearing more composed, yet tinged with desperation. Her anguish upon realizing I spent the entire night with Denise only fueled her determination. Knowing our charade was nearing its conclusion, I savored every fleeting moment. When the pivotal evening arrived, we arrived early, me donning a rented tuxedo and Marie stunning in a black evening gown with delicate spaghetti straps accentuating her neck and shoulders. We ran through her PowerPoint presentation twice to ensure everything was flawless. As she leaned over to stow her purse beneath the podium, I swiftly input the key combination, signaling that everything was in place. And as anticipated, everything unfolded precisely as I had orchestrated. We enjoyed a pleasant dinner, engaging in friendly conversation with our friends at the table. The initial greetings were somewhat dull, but then Marie was warmly introduced by the outgoing president. Nervously, she made her way to the podium amidst general applause. According to my watch, her excitement and happiness lasted precisely 54 seconds, the time between the start of the PowerPoint file and the moment her audience was confronted with still photos of her infidelity. Marie didn't freeze or spill her water, but she turned to me with horror and disbelief before frantically attempting to halt the file's playback, albeit unsuccessfully. As video clips began playing, Filling the room with sound, she stood there, visibly distressed, her face flushed, gaze fixed on the floor. She made no attempt to respond as the audience's surprise turned into a mix of indignation and laughter, ignoring the lewd remarks hurled at her as the crowd dispersed. Minutes later, we found ourselves alone. I sat quietly, observing her from across the table. Finally, she uttered the question straight out of my nightmares. "Bill, how could you do this to me? I thought you loved me." "Yes, Marie," I replied calmly. "In these past few weeks, I've loved you just as much as you loved me 6 years ago." I approached the podium and handed her several folded sheets of paper. "I'm filing for divorce. Consider yourself served. If you stay in town, you'll have joint custody of Katie and Brian. Otherwise, I'll fight for full custody, and you know I'll win." As I neared the door, her scream of anger and pain pierced the air. "But you promised you wouldn't divorce me. You said we could work things out." I turned to face her. "Yes, Marie," I said firmly. "So I suppose after all these years of you deceiving me, I deceived myself."
I, 28 male, am still trying to understand the events of the last month. My ex-girlfriend, Julie, 29, thinks that my current girlfriend, Mindy, 28, is manipulative and sabotaged our 4-year relationship. I was in a loving relationship with Julie for the last 4 years. We met through some mutual friends. Julie and I were very compatible in terms of our love for outdoor activities and running. We have very similar lifestyles and supported each other well for the last 4 years. We've also been living together for the last 3 years. We even discussed getting married during the summer. Everything was great, and I planned to propose to her over the holidays. However, I started to see changes in Julie's behavior around September. She was acting distant and looking stressed. It was quite noticeable, and I was worried. I trust her wholeheartedly, and I could not imagine she would be cheating on me. However, she did spend more time by herself. Around the same time, Julie's friend Mindy messaged me privately and asked me if I could meet her secretly, as she wanted to tell me something about Julie. Mindy and Julie worked together, and I've known Mindy ever since I started dating Julie. I was surprised, to be honest. I assumed the worst. I met her at a cafe after work. She asked me if things were going okay between Julie and me. She told me that Julie had said to her that she was planning to leave me soon. This was a total shock to me. I asked her if there was anyone else that Julie was interested in, and she said no. Julie confided in her that she wasn't sure about marrying me. She told me that she had to tell me this, as she didn't want me to be blindsided. I was devastated. I started putting more effort into making our relationship more exciting, planning more dates, etc. Mindy was also helping me through this time and telling me more about what Julie told her. Eventually, before Thanksgiving, Julie said to me that she loved me, but she wanted to take a break for a month to live alone. She said that she just wanted to live alone for a month to make sure she wanted to marry me. I was completely heartbroken. I asked her if she wanted to pursue someone else. She told me that that was not the case, and I better not do anything stupid either. She loves me with all her heart, but she just wants to stay away from me to ensure she's marrying me for love, not because she's used to being with me. I did not understand that at all. I told her that if she's not sure after 4 years if she wants to marry me, then maybe we should just break up. We had a big fight and broke up after a few days. As our lease was ending, we decided to part ways in December. She got a new apartment, and I kept our old apartment and just took her name off the lease. After the breakup, I felt very lonely, as I wasn't used to being in the apartment alone. I didn't want to keep being sad and invited many friends for a New Year's party. I also invited Mindy. We had a good time, and my friends did their best to cheer me up. Mindy also mingled with my friends, and it was good. Mindy decided to stay back to help me clean up, and we hooked up that night. I felt guilty, but Mindy did cheer me up. Since then, we've hung out almost daily at my place. I'm still sad about Julie, but I won't lie. Being with Mindy makes me happy. She's sweet and caring. Last Sunday we woke up and someone was banging on the door. I went to open it and it was Julie. She looked furious and started yelling at me. She kept on accusing me of cheating on her. I told her I most certainly did not cheat on her, and she was the one who broke up with me. Mindy was also at my apartment. Julie was just angry at both of us. She started calling Mindy a manipulative witch and told me that Mindy was the one who suggested to her that she should take some time away from me to understand her true feelings. I calmed her down and asked her to explain herself. She told me that since our marriage conversation, she told Mindy about it, and Mindy kept on asking Julie if she was sure about marrying me. Mindy suggested that she take some time to understand her true feelings and that I'll understand and give her some space. When I said no, Mindy convinced her that I was so controlling that I couldn't even give her 1 month to herself and convinced her to break up with me. Mindy told me she did not say such things. These were all Julie's ideas, and she was just there during these conversations. She did tell Julie that she told me about some of the things so that I could get a chance to make things right with her over the last few months. That made Julie more angry, and she started accusing me of emotionally cheating on her. Julie told me that the last few weeks have made her realize that we were meant to be together, but she now cannot believe that I could move on from a 4-year relationship in a week. On one hand, I want to believe Julie, but she broke up with me for no fault of my own. Mindy was there for me when I was down, but now I also doubt her. She suddenly started talking to me out of the blue, as we had never really been close before, and she immediately became my support after the breakup, although Julie was her close friend. Am I the idiot to emotionally cheat on Julie? Should I have told her about Mindy's text? Should I not have moved on from her so quickly, even though Julie broke up with me? I was just hurting, and Mindy was right there to support me. I need advice from someone with a clear mind on what's going on. Mindy played you both. It's kind of obvious from what you wrote. Man, talk to Julie. If you guys have been dating for 4 years, to the point where you were about to propose to her, you likely know her well enough to tell if she's probably lying or not. Hear her out and go with your gut. Even if you choose not to reconcile or believe her, I'd still take a break from dating Mindy. You rebounded hard. 1 week after a 4-year relationship ends, you're already sleeping with someone else? Take your time to mourn the relationship and center yourself. No need to rush into anything. I hope you were using protection. Otherwise, I expect Mindy will soon notify you of her pregnancy. Yep, the dude messed up. This level of obliviousness from OP is kinda shocking. I find it upsetting that he doesn't trust Julie's word over Mindy. He claims to have loved and trusted Julie, yet Mindy was supposedly Julie's friend, and crap-talked her and jumped in bed with him at the first opportunity. Friends don't do that. I bet Julie wouldn't treat a friend that way, and I bet when in several years Mindy goes full-out Gone Girl on him, he'll be all surprised Pikachu face. But there were no red flags at all. Mindy knew exactly what she was doing when she volunteered to stay behind after the New Year's Eve party to help OP clean. Mindy played Julie. OP played himself. Mindy is the catalytic idiot. OP is definitely the one who kept the fire burning idiot, while Julie fell for the manipulation of what was supposed to be her best friend and her entire relationship. Wow, poor girl. Imagine the destruction Mindy might cause with some other person who she doesn't want in OP's life. I once knew someone like that. Luckily, everyone started to see her true personality, and it was twisted. Good riddance to her. I feel like Julie dodged a bullet. Now she's not marrying a man who sneaks around with other women behind her back and sleeps with her friends. I've been dating Matt, 26, for a little over a year. We knew each other 2 years prior to dating, and we got along really well. I have a son, toddler, and a daughter, preschooler, who we met multiple times when I was with the friend group. Here's the thing, though. We just got a place together, but the place needed work before we could move in, So we agreed with the landlord that we would help fix it up with him, the landlord, to get half off the first month's rent. He agreed. So for a month, we were there every day cleaning this place up. And I started noticing some red flags like a quick temper. But I literally just assumed it was because the AC wasn't working. And it was like a sauna in the house. So he was pouring sweat and getting angry. But again, I thought it was because he was hot. But as soon as he cooled off, he was fine again. But we finished the house. The AC was working again, so it was no longer hot. We moved in yesterday morning. He was barking orders all day to me, telling me where to put things, or if I put something somewhere he didn't like, he was all, "Why would you put that there?" and literally looked at me like I was stupid with the "Are you serious?" look. But I let it slide because I really didn't know what else to do, I guess. Or every 15 minutes, he asked me to go with him to Walmart because he just wanted to blow a bunch of money on stuff to make the place feel like home. We hadn't even unpacked half of our stuff either. He got irritated when I said I didn't think we should spend more money right now. But anyway, I go and pick up my kids and stuff for dinner. I grab a family pack of kielbasa, the one that has 3.5 strips and rice. Well, I only cut up 2 of the kielbasa because that's literally plenty. He comes over and says, "Why aren't you making all of it?" So I told him I didn't need to make all of it and that this would feed us all and would still be enough for leftovers. Then I commented about how I would use the rest of the kielbasa that I wasn't cooking to feed my kids and myself the next day because I like kielbasa sandwiches. He blew up. Thankfully, the kids weren't inside to hear it. My mom came over and brought them to the park across the street. He told me there was no way it would feed all of us and that I was selfish for only thinking about what I would eat tomorrow instead of worrying about feeding us all tonight. He walked out and slammed the door after I said, "Are you really blowing up on me about food right now?" I watched him drive off. I immediately started taking my kids and my kids' stuff out to the car and had my mom leave with my kids. I get everything loaded up before he returns. Most of my stuff is still in storage. Well, he texted me about 25 minutes after I left, saying, "Did you really leave? Please come back and talk to me. I'm sorry. I'm having such a bad day, and I'm just exhausted from working and doing the repairs here. You shouldn't have left over this," etc., etc. So, am I the idiot for leaving the same day I moved in with my boyfriend? Edit. I generally don't have the energy to argue with salty, toxic masculinity men. I work full-time. I'm not leeching Matt's money. I bought the food with my money. Half of my money went into getting us in the house. I work full-time at a bank. He had work the next day, but I didn't. Therefore, he wouldn't have been home to eat the leftover kielbasa with me and my kids. And therefore, no, I didn't include him in it. Not the idiot. Leaving was the right decision. He thought he had you in a position where you wouldn't leave. Started being a total moron once you agreed to live together and started working on the apartment. It would have only gotten worse over time. You did what's best for you and your kids. It was the audacity to say, "You shouldn't leave over this," when he literally left over it. Rules for 3, not for me. That dude's a red flag, and you did the right thing. I'm so glad you moved you and your children out. Please don't go back to him, ever, no matter what he says. You got a dose of reality and made the very best decision for you and your kids. Well done, OP. Please tell me you took the kielbasa with you. After CPS got involved, my husband and I, both 33 and male, recently became guardians of my niece, Ella, teen. There's a lot of background here that I need to get out of the way first. Ella's father's my brother, Tom, and Ella's mom died due to complications delivering my other niece, Becca, pre-tween. Ella was 7 at the time, and she blamed Becca for their mom's death. She quickly became furious and expressed hatred for her sister and made comments about how Becca should have been the one to die instead and that Becca stole her mom from her. Tom did not get Ella any help. I got involved and warned him. Ella was not coping well, and things would turn nasty. Tom said he was helping the girls' relationship, and that's all that would be needed. Then 2 years later, with no therapy and no improvement in the relationship between the girls, Tom married Sarah. This is where things went from bad to worse. Becca adored Sarah and started calling her mom almost immediately. This only angered Ella more. She would get so angry at her dad, at her sister, at her stepmom, and she would tell Becca she deserved to die, and how dare she replace the woman who died because of her. She told Tom that he was sick for doing that to her mom. She told Sarah she was stealing from her mom, and she hated her and her ugly face, and that she would never be good enough. These things happened out in the open and were witnessed by our extended family, but they also went on at home. Sarah did her best to try and get Ella help, but Tom was not on board, and Sarah wasn't the right person to do it. CPS became involved after Ella called them on Sarah and wanted to get Becca and Sarah separated at all cost. She wanted to punish her sister for calling Sarah mom and wanted to punish Becca too. It became clear after CPS got involved that while Sarah was not a danger to Becca, Ella and Becca could not continue to live together in the environment they were in. They only took things so seriously because Ella told the social worker after wishing Becca and Sarah dead and telling them how much she hates her sister. My husband and I stepped up and offered to take Ella, which CPS agreed to. When I spoke to them about the rules and how everything would be handled, they said not to set up visits with Tom or Becca for Ella and to get Ella therapy. But they said we could attend larger family functions even if they would be there if we wanted to. But it likely would be better not to. I already knew this. My husband and I discussed it and agreed we should all stay away while Ella's with us and still struggling as much as she is. I told my family what we had decided, and they didn't understand why we couldn't have quick visits or try to expose the girls to each other in short bursts. I said it felt like it would be bad for both of them, but mostly for Ella, who I had to prioritize as she needed so much help. My family then claimed my big announcement was like a screw you to them. Tom was enraged. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. Tom has failed to help her, so it's great she has you to step up. She's not ready to be around Becca and Sarah. She needs therapy, love, and time. And you're protecting Becca. She doesn't need to be around someone who hates her that much. Poor Becca's been abused her entire life by Ella. She's going to need help. It feels like no one in your family has taken seriously Ella's behavior in the past 8 years. 8 years of believing it's nothing, just a phase, a tiny adjustment, and more minimizing magical thinking. Honestly, I don't care that the rest of your family doesn't understand. Do what is best for Ella. This is what CPS expects of you, and this is what Ella finally deserves. The rest of your family's in denial about Ella's extreme dysfunction if they support Tom's position. My family has a tradition dating back 6 generations in which the firstborn son is named William. My father and I use our middle names to avoid confusion, while my grandfather is Bill. It's not that I don't like tradition, it's just that my middle name, James, is the name I've always been known as, and I always hated being made fun of when I was younger, especially at school, when a new teacher would inevitably call out my actual first name when taking the register, and all the other kids would laugh at me for trying to explain that I didn't want to be called that. Now I'm an adult. I know that if I wanted to, I could legally change my name by deed poll, but I guess I've just gotten used to the inconvenience, and at this stage of my life, it's more of a conversation starter if anything else. I also understand that of all the things to be made fun of when younger, it's pretty low down on the list, and some people would just say I'm being petty. Anyway, I've recently become a father to a beautiful baby boy, and to my family's horror, we've named him Ezra, which both my partner and I love. We've still given him the middle name William, but this is not good enough for my family, who've practically not acknowledged my son's name at all. He's a few months old now, and whenever they interact with him, he's referred to as Junior, or the child. All I want for Ezra is for him to feel like he's his own person when he grows up, not to feel like there's some kind of burden on him to live up to any expectations we might have for him, like I suppose I've always felt somewhat, and to feel comfortable knowing that any decision he makes His mom and I will always support him. This is what makes me stand by our decision. But I can't help but feel guilt for breaking the tradition and that there's now a slight rift between me and my family, especially my dad. Am I the idiot for not naming my son William? Not the idiot. You and your partner can name your child whatever you like. You didn't start this tradition and had no say in it, so your family has no say in whether you like it going or not. I love that you kept the tradition by giving William as a middle name. That should be plenty enough. But don't feel like the idiot for naming your child. Not to mention that the mother should get a say too. What if she had her own family traditions? Why is it OP's family that supposedly gets a say? I'm not a fan of naming kids after other people in general, but seriously, one in every generation? Does it include cousins too? How confusing it must be to have so many Williams. He's referred to as Junior, or the child. I suggest you do the same with them. Always refer to them as the senior, or the mother, etc. See how long it takes them to catch on. Tradition's just peer pressure from dead people. It's not up to anyone else but you and your partner. Your family's refusing to call Ezra by his name is extremely disrespectful and immature. Obviously, not the idiot, but I will laugh if your son grows up and decides to go by William.
Consider this. In major events, it's often the small details that can make or break them. Take, for instance, the 1986 Challenger disaster, where a cheap O-ring led to the loss of 7 lives and hundreds of millions of dollars. Similarly, a tiny blood clot, barely visible under a microscope, can be fatal by blocking blood flow to a critical part of the brain. Even a small patch of ice on the road can cause a vehicle to spin out of control and result in a deadly crash. The list goes on. Seemingly insignificant factors can have devastating consequences for significant endeavors. Marriage certainly falls into the category of important undertakings. I, for one, hold my marriage in high regard. Married for just over 8 years to my lovely wife, April, we have 2 amazing boys, Chris and Charles. While I didn't earn a college degree, my skills as a mechanic have provided us with a comfortable life in a spacious home. Despite the long hours I put into my job, the financial stability it brings makes it worthwhile. My marriage has always been the highlight of my life, and I've worked diligently to support my family. Unfortunately, it's often the small things that can unravel such significant commitments. In my case, it was a tiny blood vessel in my brain that caused the downfall. Its proximity to another vessel led to swelling, triggering a debilitating migraine headache. I experienced one such episode on a particularly fateful day. The symptoms were familiar: sensitivity to light, escalating sounds, and unbearable smells. The sudden onset of excruciating pain caught me off guard. Without my Imitrex inhaler, I had no means to alleviate the agony. While I had pills on hand, they weren't as effective and would take time to ease the pain to a manageable level, rendering me unable to work. I stumbled into my boss's office and delivered the grim news. He immediately sprang into action, summoning his secretary Penny and instructing her to get me home safely, insisting that I not drive, for heaven's sake. "Go now," he urged. With Penny's assistance, my boss carefully guided me out of the office and down the hallway towards the exit. Once outside, Penny helped me lean against the wall, shielding my eyes from the harsh light as she made her way to her car. I kept my eyes shut tightly and pressed my hands against my temples, trying to dull the throbbing pain. As we drove, my vision blurred, and the light became unbearable, forcing me to keep my eyes shut. The sounds around me turned into an overwhelming buzz, and the foul smell made my stomach churn. Thankfully, Penny knew the way to my house, so I didn't need to give directions. It felt like an eternity, but eventually she pulled up outside my home, helped me out of the car, and guided me inside. I followed her lead, barely able to walk on my own. Once in the kitchen, I instructed Penny to retrieve her inhaler from the refrigerator. She placed it in my hand, held it steady as I administered it into my nose, inhaling deeply as the medication entered my bloodstream. Then I asked her to assist me to the living room adjacent to the kitchen and help me onto the sofa. I requested that she draw the blinds and turn off all the lights, which she promptly did. After a few minutes, I could already sense some relief creeping in, so I assured Penny that she could leave. Gratefully, I thanked her for her help and welcomed the peace and quiet as she departed. I must have drifted off to sleep quickly as the pain eased, because I woke later to the sound of voices. The room was shrouded in darkness, signaling that it was likely later in the day when I recalled my surroundings. Instantly, I realized the pain had vanished, leaving me feeling sore but relieved from the remnants of the migraine. Taking a moment to sit up cautiously, I waited, half expecting the pain to return, but it didn't. She had left. Thank God. In the dimness, I recognized the voices of my wife, April, and her neighbor friend, Robin. It seemed they were unaware of my presence, given the darkness and the still-off lights. Perhaps April assumed I was resting after coming home early, though my car wasn't parked in the driveway. She probably hadn't realized I was here at all. Maybe I could surprise them both. I rose quietly, planning to sneak to the door and then make my presence known. But as I tuned into their conversation, "Come on, April. How was it? Was it as good as before? Give me the details, girl." "It was amazing. I felt like I was in heaven. Even better than last time, I swear. Almost mind-blowing. The best physical engaging ever." "Better than with Chris? Better than your husband?" "Hell, yes. I adore Chris, but he never made me feel like that. Never. I wouldn't let him do those things. He'd think I'm a strumpet. But Carl, he knows, and I like it. Can't wait for next time." "Aren't you afraid Chris will find out? Have you considered the consequences?" "Chris will never know, and even if he did, so what? He's too nice to leave me. He wouldn't risk losing the kids. I'd take them in a heartbeat with a good lawyer." "This isn't like you, April. It's worrying. I think you're making a big mistake." "I love Chris, truly, but I won't give up what I have with Carl. I want both. The passion with Carl and the love with Chris. I need both, and I won't let go." I've had my fill. Though the migraine subsided, the ache in my heart was far worse. It gripped me so tightly that my stomach knotted, and each breath felt like a struggle. A ringing filled my ears, and my pulse thundered in my head. Fear surged through me as if a heart attack loomed, and I clung to the doorframe until some semblance of calm returned to my body. Still, I kept my presence hidden, but with each returning moment of control, fury simmered within me, threatening to boil over. With resolve, I straightened and stepped into the illuminated kitchen, shattering the silence. Robin was the first to notice me, her eyes widening in shock as she fell silent. April, catching Robin's reaction, turned to see me, her expression shifting from contentment to astonishment, then to dread and finally to anger, all in an instant. Pushing her chair back, April rose to confront me. "How much did you hear? Why were you lurking and spying on me?" she demanded. I met her gaze in silence, then glanced at Robin, who wasted no time in excusing herself. "I need to go. Pete and I can take care of the boys if you need time. I'll call you later," she said before hurrying out the side door. I watched her departure wordlessly. Left alone, I turned my attention back to April, once the woman I cherished unconditionally for 8 blissful years. 8 years I thought would stretch into eternity, where we'd grow old together. But tonight, that expectation shattered. There would be no forever for us. April ended it all tonight. "Where are the boys? What were you up to while you were having your fun with your lover? Did you even think about them, or were you too busy enjoying yourself with someone else while leaving them unattended?" Now, I'm composed and collected. The pain still lingers, sharp and deep. It'll take a while for it to ease. April's face twisted with anger, masking her beauty with ugliness. Perhaps that mask was the real April, hidden beneath the surface all along. She retorted, "The boys are with Carly. Robin and I went shopping, and Pete watched over them. And I wasn't with anyone else. Just Robin." With that statement, she seemed to feel victorious. The anger on her face morphed into satisfaction. Finally realizing I'd been at home, she inquired, "What are you doing here? Where's your car? And why were you sitting in the dark? Were you spying on me? Trying to catch me in the act?" "I came home early with a terrible migraine. George asked Penny to drive me home because I couldn't handle the light. I took my Imitrex and fell asleep. I've been here ever since." A queasiness churned in my stomach, and a strong urge to vomit surged through me. I rose and hurried to the bathroom. "Your voices woke me, and what I heard made me sick. I need the bathroom." With those words, I dashed to the bathroom, attempting to expel the contents of my stomach. It wasn't entirely successful, but my body certainly tried its best. I settled onto the bathroom floor, finding relief as my body gradually relaxed against the cool porcelain. Finally, my stomach calmed, and my breathing steadied. The sweat on my face dried as the nausea faded away. After a few moments, I rose, splashing water on my face and rinsing out my mouth. Once the trembling subsided and I regained some composure, I returned to the kitchen, where April sat gazing out the window. "I'm going to fetch the boys and put them to bed tonight." Brushing past her, I exited, making my way next door to the Andersons. Pete and Robin Anderson were not only our neighbors, but also our closest friends. We had shared countless evenings together, chatting and enjoying drinks. Best friends, I bitterly mused. I wondered what Pete knew. I should have asked. Knocking on their back door, I entered to find Robin seated at the kitchen table, engaged in conversation with her husband. I sensed she had told him. He looked up with pity in his eyes as I entered, while Robin appeared visibly uneasy. "I've come to get the boys. Are they ready to head home?" I bypassed Pete, heading to the living room where I presumed the boys were with Carly, their teenage daughter. They were huddled over a puzzle, Carly watching over them. As I entered, she greeted me with a smile. "Hey, Mr. Phillips, are you here for them?" Upon my nod, she said, "I'll grab their jackets." I stood there watching them, overwhelmed by a wave of sadness. These scenes, once filled with everyday joy, now bore the mark of infidelity, the innocence of family life shattered by the selfishness of adults. In many cases, irreparably so. This felt like one of those times. "Thanks, Carly. I'll be in the kitchen when they're ready." I returned to the kitchen, where Petey and Robin remained seated. I glanced at Robin, then at Petey. "Did you both know? Were you aware she cheated on me? Pete, did it bring you some twisted satisfaction knowing while we were together? Did it give you some sick thrill?" My anger fueled my words, harsher than necessary, but I needed answers from my dear friends. I should have sensed something. Pete shot a glance at Robin, his anger evident, before replying, "I swear, buddy, I had no clue. If I had known, I'd have told you right away. I can't believe my wife knew and kept it from me. It's despicable. You don't deserve this. I won't apologize to her, but I'm here for you if you need me." His gaze hardened as he looked at his wife. I believed him. He would have confided in me if he had known. So that was Robin and April's secret. "Thank you, Robin," I sneered. "Thanks for making me a laughingstock. A betrayed man. A fool who didn't need to know his wife was fooling around with another guy. I hope that sits well with you, knowing what you knew while thinking of me." I turned as I noticed Carly approaching, hastily putting on a smile as the boys emerged, each clutching a cookie. I silently prayed Carly hadn't overheard my last words, but the look on her face suggested otherwise. This marked the last time Robin would spend with my boys. That much I vowed. I didn't know how, but I'd figure it out. We came in through the back door, and the boys dashed upstairs to change for dinner. I crossed the empty kitchen into the dimly lit living room where April sat, keeping the room shadowed, much like the secrets she harbored. Turning on a nearby lamp and drawing back the curtains, I illuminated the space, revealing shadows that hinted at the concealed truths my once loving wife held. April looked dreadful. Tear-streaked eyes, pallid complexion, slouched shoulders. All the defiance had melted away, leaving behind the fearful woman I anticipated. Yet it felt too late for such a transformation. Instead of offering solace, her newfound vulnerability disgusted me. Was she truly remorseful now, or simply scared? I couldn't believe such a drastic change in mere minutes. No, this was the opening salvo in our power struggle, a deceitful wife concealing her infidelity. Her face betrayed not regret, but deception and guile. I confronted her, demanding, "Who is he? What does he offer that I don't?" She remained silent until I was certain she wouldn't respond. As I turned to leave, she finally spoke. "His identity doesn't matter. It's not about you, Chris. I'm deeply sorry you found out like this. I never intended to hurt you. I never wanted you to discover this. I'm truly sorry. You heard my conversation with Robin. Please, you must understand. It's funny. No apologies for the act, no remorse for its occurrence, just regret for being caught and you learning the truth." I shook my head, sinking into the plush armchair she gifted me on our 5th anniversary. I once cherished it, but now it was just furniture. "Please let me explain. Our story doesn't have to end here. We can salvage what we had. If only you'd try to understand, we could move forward." She pleaded with me, a familiar expression when she desired something I disagreed with. "Can you promise it's over? That you'll never see him again?" I maintained a calm tone, but my body tensed, hands gripping the chair's arms tightly for control. April met my gaze with tear-filled eyes but offered no reply. That silence spoke volumes. She wouldn't cease. I heard her words to Robin. She sought both paths and wouldn't let me hinder her. She wasn't willing to relinquish him and sought my approval. I believe this is your decision. After dinner, I'll tuck the boys in, then we can explore our options. Tomorrow, I'll pack my belongings and stay with my brother. Rising, I exited to the kitchen, a refuge amidst turmoil. It's odd how the kitchen becomes a sanctuary in dire times. Strange thoughts surface when your world crumbles. It's even stranger to realize your world is crumbling. April busied herself with dinner while I spent quality time with the boys in the playroom. Engrossed in their game, April called us for dinner, prompting a noisy transition as I ushered the boys to the bathroom to wash up. Mundane tasks, an anchor in chaos. Dinner was lively. The boys, full of energy, relished the meal and each other's company, contrasting sharply with their subdued parents lost in thought over looming decisions. The innocence of childhood slipping away. Why do kids yearn to grow up? They perceive adult freedom as boundless, unaware of the consequences and responsibilities. Adults, however, understand better, yet some disregard limits and consequences, like April. Post-dinner, April cleaned the kitchen while I escorted the boys to bed. We shared stories until they settled down, drifting into slumber where dreams knew no bounds. My heart ached as I watched, knowing this too must end. Downstairs, I sank into a chair, grasping for stability. My world slipped away beyond my control. Though I loved April deeply, her words echoed in my mind. He never made me feel this way, and I'm his strumpet. There was no turning back from those words. As I pondered the possibilities, I felt the love within me extinguish. April entered and took a seat. We need to talk. I understand you're upset, but you must grasp my perspective. What I share with Carl is purely physical and the allure of novelty. I anticipate it'll fade soon, but currently I can't seem to break away. It's what stimulates me, but it doesn't affect my love for you. He's merely a distraction, nothing more. It'll end soon and we can return to how things were. You just have to let it run its course. Her words flowed, but I struggled to comprehend. I can't resist this. I can't stop seeing him. Should I allow this to continue? Is she irrational or just deluded? Regardless, it must cease. Clearly, you're the one failing to grasp reality. There's no us. There's no we. It's just you and him. That's all that remains. It's over between us. Finished. Done. This isn't up for negotiation, and I won't budge. You need to understand this. Despite 8 years of marriage, you can't possibly believe I'd condone your affair. But Chris, I love you. You're the only man I've ever loved. I don't even like Carl. Please, try to understand. Give me time. Please, baby, for the sake of our marriage and family, give me time. Take all the time you need. Tomorrow I'll contact a lawyer and we'll divide everything equally. I don't want to hurt you like you hurt me. I just want this to end now. Emotionally drained, I yearned to retire to bed, seeking respite from the heartache. My headache had subsided, but the anguish remained. Yet, I wasn't prepared for her next words. Then damn you, no divorce. I'll fight you every step of the way and take everything you have. I'll ensure you don't get custody of the boys, and I'll restrict your visitation rights in every way possible. If you don't comply, you'll lose everything, and I'll still have Carl. You can't stop me. Remember that. I absorbed her threat. Then it struck me that this marriage had been over long ago. The level of anger and disrespect wasn't abrupt. It was calculated and deliberate. She never fretted over hurting me. If she had, she wouldn't have embarked on this path. She would have terminated it beforehand. Instead, she anticipated my discovery. Rather than ending her affair, she opted to inflict maximum pain upon me. Love had no place here, only greed and the urge to degrade me. As my anger simmered, I saw her face register that she had gone too far. Her expression, warped by her venomous words, shifted from contentment to fear. My words followed. I have one thing to say, April. When you corner a rat, it fights back. It'll fight to the bitter end if you deny it any chance of escape. You should have known that before pushing me. But now you've done it, and you'll pay the price. Please, Chris, I don't want this, but I'm left with no choice. I love you, and will do anything to keep you from leaving. If you don't understand and accept this, I'll fight you. You'll have no option but to stay with me. I know you. You love me and the boys too much to leave. I know you, Chris. You'll stay. Goodbye, April. Let the boys know I'll see them when I can. I'll gather some belongings and leave. I'll retrieve the rest later when we can arrange a time. Upstairs, I hastily packed a bag for a day or so. Just essentials from the bathroom, a few changes of clothes. Not much after 8 years of marriage. All that remained were bitter memories. But I had 2 wonderful sons, and that was my focus now. Descending, I found April seated by the kitchen door. Evidently, she was prepared to try again. "Chris, please reconsider. I'm begging you." "There's no need. Promise me you'll end things with him. You'll never see him again. Just say it and maybe there's hope." "I can't. I just can't. Please." I pushed past her, fighting the urge to strike her with all my might. But I knew controlling the anger inside wouldn't be easy, so I restrained myself. "I'll visit in the evenings after work so the boys won't notice anything right away." I swung open the door and stepped outside. It slammed shut behind me as I tossed my bag into the back seat and climbed into my truck. Backing out of the garage, I dialed Clyde, my brother, on my cell phone. He lived about 10 miles away. Ever since his wife left with her boyfriend 2 years ago, he'd been living alone, clueless about her whereabouts and indifferent to her absence. Despite not divorcing, Clyde refused to let it hold him back. He'd become quite the drinker, often indulging with his buddies almost every night. We'd discussed it, but Clyde never changed his ways. He rarely got drunk, though. He was just usually high. Perhaps he was trying to bury memories. That was my take, at least. He listened as I explained and instructed me to head over. He'd be home later. So I drove to his place, retrieved the spare key from under the flower pot on the porch, and let myself in. Everything was immaculate, as always. Clyde was far from messy. He was compulsively tidy. Always had been. It offered a sense of solace to see that despite my life crumbling, his remained unchanged. I grabbed a few beers from the fridge and settled in, just as he'd advised. By the time he returned, I was pleasantly intoxicated. I fetched another beer from the store and continued drinking. When Clyde arrived, I simply informed him of the fight with April, and he joined in, drinking the remainder of his beer to keep me in check. He assured me of his support, emphasizing our bond as brothers. The next morning, I awoke with a punishing hangover and a pounding headache. My excessive drinking was solely my doing. Despite having reasons, it was no excuse. I stumbled into the shower, letting the cold water wash away the remnants of intoxicant in my system. Staying drunk serves no purpose. I searched for Clyde and found a note indicating he was at work and would report me, which wasn't unexpected since we both had Saturday shifts. Clyde and I were employed by a company renting heavy construction equipment to major contractors statewide. Our reputation as top-notch mechanics drew customers from far and wide. Our task was to keep the machinery operational no matter the challenges. The job demanded long hours, but provided the income necessary to support my family, a responsibility I couldn't shirk. I understood the importance of continuing to earn the money that supported April's pride and joy, the spacious house. I viewed it as a haven for our family, a source of pride in providing for them. However, April seemed to perceive it differently. To her, it was a safety net, a leverage for potential divorce proceedings. She coveted the house and my earnings not for our family's security, but to fund indulgences for her lover. Lavish clothing, trips to Victoria's Secret, lingerie purchases. I turned up the faucet to drown out these unsettling thoughts, even though I was running late. I needed to escape to work, where I could focus, strategize, and make decisions. Tasks I couldn't manage in my current state. April had clearly plotted this in advance, anticipating my shock upon discovering her betrayal and knowing I wouldn't think clearly. She had manipulated the situation to portray me as the villain for disapproving of her affair, stacking the deck in her favor. I dressed and fetched a box of large trash bags, anticipating April's departure with the boys to her mother's house. Inside, I emptied my closet and drawers into the bags, gathering essential items from the bathroom into a smaller bag. Laden with bags, I loaded them into my truck's back seat and returned inside. I wouldn't leave just yet. I intended to return after work to spend time with the children. I had much to ponder and decide. One thing was certain. My marriage was over, and April would never again be my wife, lover, or confidant. She belonged to someone else now. As I pondered, tears welled up uncontrollably, and I sank to the floor of what once was our bedroom, succumbing to grief. Loss weighs heavily, especially in the workplace. I threw myself into my duties, toiling relentlessly even through lunch breaks, eager to drown out thoughts of home, wife, and children, amidst the challenges of fuel injectors, timing chains, and fuel pumps. I tackled the toughest tasks without complaint, consumed by a fervor to bury myself in work. 10 hours later, Clyde interrupted, urging me to take a break. "Dude, ease up. You're making the rest of us look like slackers," he remarked, watching me with a mixture of surprise and concern. "Sorry, little brother. Just trying to lose myself in it all, just trying to forget." My bad. I must have seemed on the verge of tears as Clyde guided me off the shop floor and into the break area. Clyde and I had been inseparable since our parents' tragic accident a decade ago. He had been my best man at the wedding, and 8 years ago he became the godfather to my boys, Chris Jr. and Charlie. Seated at the table, I stared blankly as Clyde poured us each a cup of hot coffee, devoid of flavor but comforting in its warmth. "All right, spill it. Lay it all out. No holding back," Clyde encouraged, prompting me to recount the ordeal in detail. For the next 10 minutes, I poured out to Clyde every ounce of shame, humiliation, and contempt April had heaped upon me. I divulged her menacing threats, her calculated attempts to undermine any retaliation on my part while safeguarding her affair. I recounted the disdain on her face as she boasted to Robin about her tryst and the cold determination in her threats to strip me of everything. She made it abundantly clear that her lover's gratification was paramount, unwilling to relinquish him for anything. Clyde was taken aback. He had always regarded April highly, seeing her as a virtuous woman and dedicated mother. His brother had never hinted at any marital issues, leading Clyde to believe their union was solid. Now, faced with the reality of Chris's pain and anguish, it pained Clyde just to witness it. Chris was a pillar of strength, a devoted father, a reliable provider, and a trusted confidant for the guys in the garage, always there when needed. Over the years, he had gone above and beyond to help others. Yet, Clyde's shock turned to anger. How could April do this to Chris? What was wrong with her? His indignation swelled as he observed his brother and closest friend shattered and defeated. "Chris, listen to me. You can't just accept this. We have to take action. Let me and the guys lend a hand. This is unbearable," Clyde implored, concern etched on his rugged features. It was genuine care for his brother, palpable in the air. Chris met his gaze with a despondent expression. "What can I do? If I divorce her, she'll strip me of everything. Child support, alimony, the house, the car. You know I'd never injure the kids. She's using them as pawns against me. And now that idiot she's fooling around with will replace their father. He's an idiot who thinks it's okay to bet another man's wife. I'm powerless." Clyde shook his head vehemently. "To hell with both of them. I used to love April like a sister, but she's made her bed, and now she'll have to lie in it. We need to go after both of them. First step, figure out who he is. That's the easy part. Let me make a couple calls, then we'll discuss," Clyde declared. I simply shrugged. "All right, but I'm not sure what you expect me to do. She doesn't share anything about him with me." "Doesn't matter. We'll track him down and expose him like we would anyone else. And you realize you can't take April back, right? What she did makes reconciliation impossible. If you condone her actions, she'll never respect you again. No way, man. She's someone else's plaything now." His words caught me off guard momentarily, but then a faint smile crept onto my face. "You're right. She's not my beloved wife anymore. Last night taught me how swiftly love can morph into hatred, and my animosity towards her today eclipses any love I ever had for her. Last night she stole that from me and turned it against herself. I made that clear to her." We continued chatting a bit more, then wrapped up work without any extra hours. We headed to a nearby bar with no intention of getting drunk. This was business. Plans needed to be made. Clyde made a few more calls, and we sat down to strategize. I was touched by the unwavering support from my friends. They didn't pry, just wanted to know how they could assist. Together, we devised a feasible plan. At 7 that evening, I pulled into my driveway and entered the house. It struck me as funny. This was no longer my home. It was just a place to stay. Shedding my jacket in the kitchen, I made my way to the living room. There, April sat in her chair, watching Chris and Charlie, our 5-year-old twins, engrossed in a video game. I stood there, capturing the scene in my mind forever. April met my gaze as I glanced at her, her faint smile now revealing its true contempt for me and our facade of family unity. It was all a charade, orchestrated by her deception. Now I saw and understood. I returned her gaze with a look of disdain, devoid of any smile. When I turned away, she averted her eyes. Heading to the kitchen, I peered into the fridge, pulling out what appeared to be leftover fried chicken and mashed potatoes, reheating them in the microwave. I wasn't hungry, but I needed the distraction. I had intended to speak with the boys before their bedtime, but Clyde advised against it, urging me to postpone the conversation for now. But when I do address them, it will mark the first move in the battle initiated by April. I might have lost, undoubtedly, but I would fight to the end. Seated with my plate, I began to eat slowly, the food offering little satisfaction but necessary for sustenance. About halfway through, April joined me at the table, sitting across from me. I glanced at her briefly before returning my focus to my meal, chewing deliberately. There were no words exchanged. I had nothing to say to her at the moment. Are you feeling more composed after last night? Can we engage in a civilized conversation now? Her words caught me off guard. Civilized adults? How about a cheating woman and her betrayed husband? That's more realistic. Opting for silence instead, I withheld my response. Are you going to ignore me now? Acting childish and silent? I had higher expectations of you, Chris. We need to consider the children now. You must remember your role as their father in this household. Am I truly their father now? It makes me wonder. Maybe I should confirm with some tests. Let's keep this civil, without anger, just a simple statement. April's expression darkened with fury, poised to retort when I calmly interjected. Watch your tone, April. The children might overhear if you start shouting. Remember them? The ones you accused me of neglecting last night when I got upset? Well, now it's your turn to remember. Reflect on what you've done to their world. Not only did you indulge in an affair, you shattered our entire family. Think carefully, April. April paused, lowering her voice to a hiss. You didn't seem to consider my words last night. I expected you to move past this and return to normal. Nothing will change at home. I still love you, and you are my husband. That hasn't changed. Neither you nor the children will lose anything familiar. I keep my affairs discreet, conducting my business when they're at school and you're at work. You have nothing to lose, as I'm always here for you. I remained silent, continuing to eat methodically. I maintained a stoic expression, devoid of reaction. My eyes betrayed nothing as I looked at her. Despite the absence of verbal response, my eyes conveyed everything. Slowly, April began to grasp the gravity of the situation. For the first time, a hint of fear flickered through her. What do you intend to do? Will you make things difficult for me? I hoped you loved me enough to grant me this time alone. I told you last night that he didn't take anything from you and that I'll always support you. Why can't you grasp that? April grew increasingly emotional, while I continued to stare at her, calmly chewing my food. Finally swallowing, I suggested, let's save this discussion for after the kids are in bed. I listened to you last night despite my discomfort, but I won't entertain this conversation while the children are awake. April appeared to regain her composure and resumed smiling. Thank you for that. I think you had some valid points, but your words hurt me. I'll take the boys upstairs soon, and then we can talk. She passed by me, placing her hand on my shoulder. I involuntarily flinched at her touch, causing her to retract her hand. The disgust I felt from that simple gesture was palpable. With the kids, I tried to maintain my usual self, though knowing everything was about to change weighed heavily on me. Yet, I had come to terms with the fact that April's actions had shattered it all for me. Perhaps I should just play the role of the compliant husband and accept her terms. Wait until she's done with her affair. After all, hadn't she claimed she still loved me and wanted to remain married? But I knew I couldn't do it. Not now. Not ever again. Around 9 o'clock, April entered the room where I sat. Letting out a heavy sigh, she settled into a chair and smiled. I put them to bed, and they fell asleep. They're getting too big to tuck in, but they still say goodnight and pretend to sleep. They're good boys. I nodded in agreement. They're wonderful kids. It's unfortunate that they'll have to endure so much pain, and I'm unsure how to ease their suffering. What do you mean? I thought you understood that nothing needs to change. Just give me what I want, and we can return to being the same family we were. Just be patient. I promised it would all be over soon. You won't lose anything. I love you deeply and want to remain your wife. It's just something I have to do. That's all. I gazed at the woman who had been my wife for the past 8 years. I married her because I couldn't imagine life without her. We had 2 amazing children and a solid marriage until last night. Now everything was different, and she couldn't comprehend why I deemed it necessary. I wouldn't delve into the specifics tonight, but I needed to be unequivocal. April, I heard you out last night. You made your desires clear. You claimed you love me and want to be my wife. You insist he doesn't take anything from me, refuse to disclose his identity because it's none of my business, and you outlined the consequences if I pursued a divorce. You made it abundantly clear that you'll strip everything from me without hesitation, just as you stated. You threatened to take everything, even my boys. That much was evident. April listened, her face displaying anger. She wasn't pleased with my recap of her words. However they sounded, they resonated differently coming from me, but she recognized the truth in what I conveyed. I perceive that you don't view this situation the same way I do, Chris. I emphasized that this isn't about our marriage, yet you didn't heed my words. Why can't you trust me when I express that I still love you and desire to uphold our marriage? What I heard from you last night, April, was disdain. Disdain toward me and our marriage. When I expressed frustration, you retaliated with premeditated threats. Threats that you had carefully considered before addressing me. Disdain for me, for all my efforts on our behalf over the years. You belittle me, degrade me, threaten me, and accuse me of misunderstanding. You were fully aware that I would react just as I did. Why did you presume to have already determined what to do with me? Why did you believe you had all the answers ready? Now I was starting to feel angered. Up until now, I had remained composed and in control, but that composure was gradually slipping away. April's enraged expression infuriated me. I came to one conclusion that you seemed to overlook last night, April, when you threatened and backed me into a corner, thinking I couldn't find a way out. I mentioned it then, and I'll reiterate it now. Even a rat will fight a cat when cornered and with nothing left to lose. With these words, I stood up and walked away. As I approached the kitchen door where April was seated, I paused. I'm going to stay elsewhere for the night temporarily. I'll return after work so the kids won't notice anything right away. Why are you planning to stay somewhere else? Why not stay here? We can't resolve this problem if you leave. Chris, please don't. I love you and don't want to lose you. I don't know what I'll do if you leave me. Please, Chris, let's attempt to address this. There must be a way to reconcile. I'm sorry, April. The only certainty I have now is that I no longer love you. Your infidelity last night extinguished all my love for you. That's the only thing I know for sure. I'm unsure of what I'll do next, but I'm certain there's no turning back now. Chris, what about your vows to love and cherish me? Have you forgotten them? I also recall your vows to me. You pledged on our wedding day to forsake all others, yet you didn't. You promised to love only me, but you shared what we had with another man. I cared for you, loved you, upheld our marital vows, and gave you everything I had. It wasn't sufficient. You bestowed what was mine upon someone else. You gave it away, shattering my love in the process. So yes, I can move past this. You shattered my love for you into pieces. I can depart, and I will. I headed to Clyde's house, where he welcomed me to stay as long as needed. Time to finish what we started. Soon, it'll all be over, and I'll begin anew. In the following days, I balanced work with evenings spent with my kids. However, I avoided any further interaction with April. Despite her attempts to engage, I walked away each time. On one occasion, she yelled, but I simply left without a word. During a work break, a colleague informed Clyde that preparations were complete and we'd have results in a few days. All that remained was patience. The routine continued unchanged until the following week. Each evening, I returned to an increasingly agitated April. The kids seemed oblivious, but Charlie's question about my long hours prompted reassurance. He seemed satisfied, and the momentary crisis passed. April persisted with questions, but I ignored her, leaving when she took the kids to bed. By week's end, Clyde entered the break room and handed me a folder. Without a word, I opened it to find a brief report. Carl Cummings, a 24-year-old junior attorney at Lincoln, Rice & Holmes. Divorced 2 years ago, financially stable, residing in a condominium where April had visited multiple times that week. Now armed with a name and address, I pondered what allure he held that eluded me. Yet it was no longer my concern. Had April approached me earlier, perhaps this could have been resolved differently. So what's next? What steps should I take? I sought Clyde's guidance. Though the issue was mine, Clyde seemed the one in charge. I was fortunate to have friends and a brother like Clyde. Being a good man and diligent worker sufficed for true friends. Now I needed them more than ever. Everything's underway. The first move happens tonight. I'll call you once it's set. Just keep your phone close. You can inform her and put an end to this mess. Okay. Knowing it needed to be done didn't bring relief. This wasn't my preferred approach. However, April and her lover left me no choice, and I fought back the only way I could. I wasn't a lawyer or a wealthy strategist. I was a mechanic, a hardworking individual who took pride in providing for his family through honest labor. I loved April deeply, but my efforts weren't enough for her. Fine. My plan aligned with my world, and she'd soon realize it. Returning home, I joined my family for dinner as usual. April engaged with the kids, and I participated in conversations and activities, concealing my nervousness. After dinner, I spent quality time with the kids, playing video games and assisting with homework, playing the role of the typical husband and father. April, finishing the dishes, observed the scene, seeming more at ease, perhaps thinking everything would soon return to normal. As I played video games with my boys, Carl Cummings left his office, headed to his car parked across town. He reflected on the intense encounter with April at his place 2 days earlier. She was eager for him, agreeing for the first time to get close when he asked why. After their rendezvous, she revealed her husband had discovered their affair. Shocked, Carl was reassured by her not to worry. It struck him as odd that her husband's knowledge seemed to heighten her adventurousness. Despite this, it was the best physical engaging he'd had, so he brushed it off. Walking past an alley toward his car, he suddenly stumbled, feeling a pull. As he struggled to maintain his balance and avoid falling, someone seized his arms and pulled him down the alley toward the courtyard. Pinned against the building's wall by two imposing figures, one on each side, he strained to discern their faces beneath their black ski masks. Despite their intimidating size, fear began to creep over him. With little cash and no flashy accessories, he wondered what they wanted. A third masked man, wearing gloves, stepped forward and lifted Carl's face with a firm grip under his chin. In a coarse voice, he inquired, "You familiar with a woman named April Phillips?" Idiot. The mention of her name sent a shiver down Carl's spine. Oh no. So that's what this is about? Her darn husband. She never mentioned he was involved. No, I don't know anyone by that name, he stammered, shaking, yet determined to deny everything. The hefty man landed a blow to his ribs, causing excruciating pain and stealing his breath. Dizzy, he saw stars swirling before him. The intense agony gripped him, instilling deep fear. I'll ask again. You familiar with a woman named April Phillips? Idiot. Unable to deceive any longer, Carl abandoned denial. Yes, I know her. Please, God, let me make it out of here alive, he prayed silently. You'll never cross paths with her again. Clear? The imposing figure awaited his response. Crystal clear. Got it? Perhaps it was merely a warning. Got it? He could accept that. I need to ensure you grasp this fully. My pals and I aren't convinced someone like you, messing with other men's wives, is all that bright. So we're going to ensure you comprehend, the big man explained ominously. Ceasing their pressure against the wall, they allowed him to steady himself. The initial blow struck him hard in the groin, causing him to double over. Despite his agony, they prevented him from collapsing, delivering another blow to his ribs. A sharp click signaled a broken rib. Then came a devastating blow to his jaw, nearly toppling him with pain. Subsequent strikes hit him in the groin until, mercifully, he blacked out. They likely continued their assault until they ceased. Gradually brought back to consciousness, they drilled a few words into him repeatedly. His memory faded until he awoke in Memorial Hospital's emergency room. While his injuries weren't life-threatening, he was admitted to the general care unit, heavily medicated and in intense pain. Grateful for his survival, he whispered a prayer. They informed him that she might contact him, instructing him precisely what to say. He recalled the words he needed to convey to her. I deeply apologize, Mrs. Phillips. It was my fault, and I deeply regret it. I will cease all contact with you and your children. I'm sorry our paths ever crossed. Farewell. Carl reclined on the bed, awaiting her call. He rehearsed these words in his mind to avoid any errors. He reminded himself that any deviation would not go unnoticed, and the consequences would be severe. Repeating the phrases to himself once more, he vowed never to pursue a married woman again, regardless of who she may be. Just past 8 in the evening, while playing with the twins, my cell phone rang. Excusing myself to another room, I took the call. Seeing Clyde's caller ID, I heard a brief message. It's done. Lesson 1 completed. He was admitted to the hospital. Then the call ended. Returning to the living room with a smile, April noticed but said nothing, returning a smile herself, interpreting it as good news. Later, April took the children upstairs, casting a questioning glance at me. Assuring her I'd be there when she returned, she smiled broadly and went about putting the children to bed. Settling into the living room, I waited in anticipation. The moment of reckoning had arrived. As April returned with a coffee pot and cups, she suggested we talk further. Noting my apparent resignation, she expressed relief, professing her love and fear of losing me over such trivial matters in comparison to our relationship's depth. I observed her as she spoke, her beauty still captivating me. After all, she was the woman I'd cherished for so long, envisioning a future of growing old together. But now, those plans, those dreams, lay shattered. Let the end commence. Now, April, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully, I began. I know your lover's name is Carl Cummings, a junior associate at Lincoln Rice & Holmes. I know all about him, including your 2 meetings with him this week. April appeared surprised, poised to respond, but I motioned for her to remain silent. That's the issue. You threatened me with divorce. When I expressed my anger, you threatened to strip away everything I have. I remember your exact words etched into my mind. You said, "I'll take everything you have." You said more, but those were the words that lingered, words dripping with contempt that shattered our marriage. Those were the words that pushed me into a corner, where I felt I had no choice but to watch you engage in closeness with another man. I told you the following night that cornered rats fight back. Now, I could see the initial flickers of fear and discomfort on her face. She wasn't certain what lay ahead, but she was savvy enough to realize it wouldn't be to her liking. Her shoulders tensed, and she instinctively withdrew her head in defense. I know you told Robin that I never made you feel the way you felt with him, that you were his mistress, I continued. I don't regret that this will end in a manner unfavorable to you. However, Mr. Cummings has been explicitly informed that his involvement with you is over. He'll never see you again or engage in any further closeness with you. Never. He was also cautioned against any contact with my sons, to which he agreed. Watching her face register shock and disbelief, I proceeded. I'll initiate divorce proceedings citing infidelity with no spousal support for you. Child support will be provided for my sons, ensuring they lack nothing as long as you fulfill your duties. I'll ensure you have the means, but you'll need to work for your own desires. I'll handle the paperwork, and you'll be served. April rose, anger evident on her face. You're delusional if you think I'll agree to this, and I'll take everything you have just as I promised, she retorted, still defiant despite her fear. She intended to bluff until the very end, as she had strategized. Why don't you call your Mr. Cummings right now? Let's see his response. Oh, wait, I believe you might need to dial the hospital. That call I received earlier informed me he's in the emergency room at Memorial. I presume the news has reached you by now. Use my phone. I already have his number. April gazed at me in shock. What have you done? What happened to Carl? Oh my God. Chris, what did you do? Why, April, are you seriously asking me? I've been here at home with you all evening, and I was at work earlier, so I couldn't have done anything to anyone. Why do you think I did something? Why would I even think to injure your lover? You made it abundantly clear that I should steer clear of this situation. It's none of my concern. My demeanor surely frightened April. She had never seen me like this. I was typically calm and passive, never causing injury to anyone. I wouldn't even discipline the children physically, leaving that to her. Now, she viewed me differently. My expression was cold and stern, my eyes devoid of emotion. April entered the next room, and I overheard her speaking on the phone. She returned with tears in her eyes, collapsing into a chair and staring into the distance. I remained composed, picking up the newspaper. I knew what she had heard on the phone. Her lover was ending things with her, faced with the choice of that or enduring a smacking each time he encountered her. That was the ultimatum delivered to him by 3 imposing men who intercepted him as he left work earlier. They made it clear why they targeted him and what repercussions awaited if he dared to see or speak to April again. They ensured he fully comprehended the message. April dried her tears, took a deep breath, and addressed me. Well, it seems you've gotten your way. Carl informed me he never wants to see me again. He mentioned that all my belongings will be returned to me and he has no desire to communicate with me. In that case, you have nothing to fret over. I have legal representation, so they will handle everything swiftly, I responded, setting the newspaper aside and rising to depart. I'll speak with the boys this weekend and explain why we're divorcing. Perhaps they're mature enough to grasp the situation. If not, they'll eventually understand as they grow older. As I made my exit, I glanced back to see April sobbing. If I recall your words correctly, April, you once claimed this affair would be short-lived and we could return to normalcy, I chuckled bitterly. You're still young and attractive, April. Maybe you'll find someone willing to indulge your fantasies. Someone open to an unconventional marriage, allowing you to pursue multiple partners. That wasn't me, but that's just my perspective. Best of luck. Children may not comprehend this, but adults must face the consequences of their actions, and those consequences can be harsh.